Our story begins with meeting the prince of the royal family. This is not the first time Jamie Welton has woken up from a long, boring dream. He is the eldest son of the Welton royal family and its legal heir. But no one knows who he was before he was reborn in this body. During another battle more than 50,000 years ago, he found himself in a difficult position, but did not admit defeat. Fighting with 12 gods, this magician declared that they were unable to defeat him because all they could do was to seal him. With a loud laugh, he declared that he was not against it, but warned his enemies that after his rebirth, the bright lights of the 12 gods would be plunged into complete darkness. Known in the past as Diablo Wolfer, he promised that he would not let them die easily and they would regret defying him. Thus, the 12 gods were able to seal him, but after a huge amount of time, a crack appeared in their barrier, thanks to which he was able to escape and was eventually reborn as the son of this family. Being the son of royalty, he received an incredible amount of attention, and his parents were delighted to see him. This was the first rebirth of the great magician from the past. As a child, he tried to say something in response to his annoying parents, but his vocal apparatus was not developed enough. He became an aristocrat, dearly loved by his parents. About 9 years have passed since then, yet he was forced to play his role like a child. For a great magician who had lived for more than 50,000 years, this was very tiring. Taking a break from excess attention, he realized that another boring day awaited him. When he woke up, a nanny came to see him, who also admired the young heir of the family. Jamie behaved with integrity and always treated his elders with respect. Having high manners, when asked what he was doing so early in the morning, the guy politely replied that he was admiring the beautiful morning sky. Not only his parents were annoying, but also his nanny, who complimented him during every meeting. A kind woman offered to help the heir get dressed, because his parents were already waiting for him. As befits the royal family, they spent breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. Approaching the door to the dining room, the nanny politely announced that the young master had arrived for breakfast. Realizing what awaited him, Diablo Wolfer sighed heavily. As soon as he walked inside, an incredible amount of care from the family was directed his way. The great magician from the past played his role perfectly. In addition to the heir, the royal family also had a daughter. Their parents never tired of noticing how cute and beautiful their children were. The only daughter of the noble family, Belle was not actually the young master's real mother. Jamie's father was the head of the royal family, Welton, one of the 5 sword masters of their kingdom named Arjano. Although he has a really impressive status and is a formidable and powerful sword master, he is crazy obsessed with his wife and his children. Sister Sarah was much younger than her promising brother. Jamie got along well with her and played along in every possible way. During every meal together, he could not avoid her attention. Playing his role perfectly, he brought great joy to the parents, who were very proud of their children. This was repeated almost every day. The great magician behaved like a child, while in fact he would like to enjoy solitude. Returning to his room was a real relief for him. It was hard for him to get used to this lifestyle. Over time, it became easier, because he had a greater variety of activities. This mansion didn't seem like such a bad place to him. His family's private library was the most interesting place. In addition, Jamie acquired an interesting pet. When alone, he could call him to his aid. Also, thanks to the fact that he was reborn, he had a new ability. His hatred for the 12 gods did not fade away, because they continued to exist even after 50,000 years. Because he was so young, he was not yet capable of much. Since there was little information about dark magic during the era of his rebirth, time was on his side. Feeling hatred for the 12 gods, he dreamed of how to get rid of their annoying existence. But at one point, his happy loneliness was interrupted by a visit from the nanny. The woman was talking about how it was time to read children's books with her mistress. Each time these words seemed like torture to him. But because of his young age, he was forced to demonstrate politeness so as not to reveal his secret. Sometimes playing the sweet boy was so hard that he missed the times when he was sealed in the god's trap. Unlike him, his younger sister, as always, was delighted with this way of spending time. But as soon as the reading of the book began, Sarah fell asleep. After reading a fairy tale about a magician named Heinz, a caring mother asked if the children liked it. With a smile and a sparkle in his eyes, James said that he wanted to become as cool a magician as the main character of the fairy tale. Mom didn't even doubt that he would achieve success, because despite the fact that he was only 9 years old, he defeated all 3 magic teachers who were hired to teach him. Gently placing her hand on the head of her beloved son, the lady said that his dad had invited the most powerful magician he knew to visit. After these words, the magician began to hope that he would finally meet a worthy master of our time. After reading a fairy tale with his mother, Jamie decided to do something more interesting and went to the library. Unfortunately for him, he couldn't find anything interesting, and yet another book on the use of mana turned out to be a waste of time. It was lunchtime, and Jamie decided to come before the nanny went to pick him up. But as soon as he left the library, he saw a strange stranger in front of him. The gray-haired man looked at one of the statues of their luxurious mansion and was surprised that the Welton family used a rare artifact as decoration in front of the dining room. The young master had never seen this person before. When the old man paid attention to him and greeted him, Diablo Wolfer, for the first time since his rebirth, saw such a large amount of mana that it seemed as if it was literally flowing out of the owner's body. Assessing the stranger by modern standards, the magician from the past assumed that in front of him was a master of at least the 7th level. He still didn't understand how he managed to get inside their mansion so unnoticed. Jamie was suspicious of him, although the old man did not seem hostile. The young master was of particular interest to the advanced magic master. While Jamie was trying to find out who he was and what he was doing inside their house, the old man analyzed his mana and was surprised that at such a young age he was already a mid-level master. Of course, the well-mannered heir to the royal family understood that he had started their conversation incorrectly, but he was infuriated by the calm behavior and gaze of the stranger. The 9-year-old magician was infuriated by this situation and decided that the stranger should be taught a lesson. The guy's behavior surprised the stranger and he became curious what would happen next. Jamie couldn't believe that in response to his use of mana, a stranger would dare to do the same. He was filled with anger that some old man dared to test him. His pride was justified, because in his previous life, he was almost able to destroy all the gods with his own powers. Concentrating mana on his fingers, Jamie repeated the attack, which he was able to defeat all the magic teachers he hired. But in the end, this attack did not meet his expectations and did not bring any results at all. It became clear that the old man was significantly superior to him in mana reserves and the ability to use it for defensive purposes. Seeing what the heir to the royal family was capable of, the old man was simply in admiration and could not believe that such a capable magician was only 9 years old. Within a moment, a magician of at least the 7th level shouted that it was a good try, after which he began to form a counterattack. This magician was significantly superior to those whom the heir had encountered previously. His attack seemed quite serious. But there was one thing about this situation that kept Jamie from reacting seriously. He knew from the very beginning that this attack was not aimed at him, so there was no point in dodging. The old man was simply shocked that despite the demonstration of terrifying strength, the boy did not even blink an eye. Unexpectedly for both sides, Swordmaster Arjano intervened in their show of force. Dissatisfied with this situation, the gentleman turned to the guest and said that he had gone too far. After this, he turned to his dear son and asked if everything was all right. In response, Jamie began to act confused and, in order to take revenge on the arrogant old man, he decided to demonstratively cry. As soon as Mr. Argano saw the tears of his beloved son, with a threatening tone, he asked the magician to step aside for a serious dialogue. The old man felt awkward, seeing that the boy's reaction was fake. In response, a master of magic named Marcus Linmill began to laugh loudly and said that for him this situation seemed like a very funny conflict, after which he admitted that he was very jealous of the Count. As it turned out, this magician was the person whom Mr. Welton hired to teach his son. Their conversation began with the Count's dissatisfaction with the fact that the magician behaved recklessly towards the heir of the Welton family. In response, the old man said with a smile while drinking tea that he knew about it. Hearing such carefree words, Mr. Arjano became seriously angry. The old man asked to listen to him and calm down, because the aura of the Swordmaster was putting great pressure on him. Marcus decided to start the conversation by asking how much the Count knew about his son. The man who spent all his free time raising his own children could not understand what he was talking about. As it turned out, the old man meant that he simply admired the genius of the heir to the Welton family. In response, the excited Count said that this was the reason why he entrusted him to the best magician he knew, but it was unclear to him why the old man suddenly attacked his son. The respected magician said that most likely the local Count really does not know everything about his son. Mr. Welton could not help but listen to his words about his son's magical abilities, because Linmel considers Macruse to be the most powerful 8th grade master among all living magicians. Based on this, the father began to worry that someone like him was unlikely to recognize his son, and that perhaps even Jamie was not as good as he thought. Noticing the gentleman's excitement, the old man warned him that he was absolutely serious. Unexpectedly for the Swordmaster, the 8th level magician declared that he could not take his son as his student, since he simply could not cope with him. With a sincere smile, the Grand Master of Magic admitted that Jamie was able to read all his actions. The Swordmaster doubted his words, believing that it was impossible, no matter how smart his son was. To clear up his father's misunderstanding, the old man explained that his son immediately realized that his spell was flying by. The great magician admitted that he was surprised that the heir of the Welton family did not even flinch at a time when very strong magic was aimed at him. Then, with a very satisfied look, the old man stated that Jamie was already able to become a third-class magician thanks to self-study alone. He believed that if they turned a blind eye to his body's limit, then his level would be even higher than level 4. The Grandmaster seriously stated that the heir of the Welton family is not just a genius, but a real monster who does not need any teacher. He believed that the son of a great swordsman only needed support, then he would continue to improve himself. After these words, he declared that the Count had given birth to a legendary 9th-grade magician. As expected, the Count was simply shocked by the words of the Grand Master. After that, the magician began to stand up and ask for forgiveness for attacking the heir of the Welton family. He stated with hope that with the advent of such talent, great discoveries await the whole world. After the solemn announcement, the old man began to use teleportation magic and disappeared. Count Arjuna Welton was left alone. He wasn't prepared to hear something so shocking, so he wanted to think about what to do next. Evening came, the great magician from the past, who was reborn in the body of the heir of the Welton family, once again felt incredible fatigue due to his relationship with such a caring and attentive family. As soon as his mother found out about what happened between her son and the magician, she attacked him with tears and promised that she would deal with the old man who had offended Jamie. The guy believed that despite the difficult day, everything was not so bad, because he was able to see the real spell of this time. It wasn't that bad. The reincarnated Diablo Wolfer believed that the composition, technique, and balance of this spell were top-notch. But he was more impressed not by Mr. Marcus, but by his father, Count Arjuna Welton. With a smile on his face, Jamie said out loud that such a strong swordmaster was worthy of being his father. Suddenly, for the heir, Mr. Marcus appeared on his bed, and with a sincere smile asked what made the young heir feel such joy. An experienced magician from the past was simply shocked by the sudden appearance of a magician in his room. The old man assumed that Jamie didn't notice him because he was too lost in his thoughts. Demonstrating his acting game, the guy got scared and fell to the floor, after which he panicked and asked what the strange old man had forgotten in his room. With a loud laugh, the old man was surprised that such a young genius could be scared so easily. First of all, Jamie asked in confusion how he got into his room. Rising from the bed, Marcus Linmel replied that he used teleportation. From the very beginning, Jamie understood that this was not an ordinary old man, but he could not believe that he could teleport to his room without any problems. Pointing his finger at the young man, the magician noticed that the heir was modest when he was near his father, and then asked why the guy behaved differently when he was in front of strangers. Rising from the floor, the heir answered displeasedly that family and strangers are completely different things. Then the old man approached the heir of the Welton family and suddenly said that he was not strong enough to train such a rare genius. After that, he held out the magical memoirs in his direction. The guy asked why the old man decided to give him this book. In response, the old man shocked him with the words that the magic that Jamie uses has long been outdated. Jamie began to feel awkward about this expression, which seemed humiliating to him. With a smile on his face, the old man thought that his reaction meant that he was touched by the gift. Talking about the book, the old man said that it contained many of his original spells and that the heir Welton would be the first to read it. Hearing his words, the guy immediately began reading, because he was filled with interest in what spells this great magician had created and how much the magic of this time differed from his own. Noticing the guy's interest, the old man decided to distract him from reading before saying goodbye. With a serious look, the great magician stated that he had high hopes for the future of the Welton family's young master. As he left the room via teleportation, he said that he was very interested in what the young genius would be like the next time they met. Saying goodbye to him, Jamie confidently declared that he would become much stronger than the old man thought. Magicians pass all the magic that exists in this world through themselves and then absorb it with their hearts. This is the most effective way to learn to control your mana. But there is one big problem. This is the restriction from the young master's body. Since Marcus Linmel called the heir's magic too old, he wanted to know what spells the great magician uses. The guy, hungry for knowledge, was delighted with what he saw. But after a few minutes, he closed the book, believing that it was too complicated. In order to use her knowledge, the magician must try hard to feel every particle of mana so that it can pass through the body and skin. The guy didn't understand who was even capable of such madness. In addition, he managed to find two disadvantages of the old man's method, and decided that the old methods could not be surpassed and that he should not bother himself with such training. But after a moment, he remembered that he himself was the great magician of the past, Diablo Wolfer. After this, his inspiration returned. With a smile on his face, he opened the book and said that the old man had opened his eyes. Jamie was determined that he would read every page of the precious book. which was far superior to any he had previously dealt with. To begin with, he decided to use outside help and called on his pet. Turning to the black pet, he asked him to spray some mana. Flying up, the little black one fulfilled his master's request. The first disadvantage of the old man's technique was that the absorption of grains of mana by one's body has a limit in which all proportions must be strictly observed. But the young genius did not have to worry, because this problem was solved by the pet. The Blackling with whom he has a contract can spray the required amount of mana, so the problem with proportions has been solved. The second disadvantage was Jamie's body. He had a limit on the amount of mana his heart could take. But the inventive magician decided that this problem could be avoided by distributing all the mana to different parts of the body, and thereby avoiding the limit. Jamie was so engrossed in the process of studying the old man's skills that he did not notice how morning came. Seeing what was happening in his room, the worried nanny was forced to ask the Count for help. Mr. Arjano Welton couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was shocked that mana was swirling around his son. He knew that Marcus had given Jamie something, but he couldn't understand how his son had learned to control mana in just one night. Overflowing with love for his son, he suggested that sweet Jamie had many hidden talents that they did not yet know about. Addressing the nanny, the gentleman asked not to worry and to assign someone to his door because it was unknown when he would leave his room. In response, the caring nanny said that she would personally look after the young master so that my lord would not worry about his condition. When leaving, Arjano Welton understood that his son would become a magician, not a swordsman. Still, he was genuinely excited about his son's prospects, even though Jamie wouldn't follow in his footsteps. Using his pet as an assistant, the magician continued to master modern methods. After 12 hours of hard training, he returned to reality, because he managed to comprehend such a complex method of mana control. At first, it was quite difficult to control the mana because its movements were unpredictable for him, but after several attempts, he achieved the result. Despite his success, it seemed to him that at this age his limit was the 4th level of magician power, judging by modern standards. Sighing heavily, he realized that he was close to reaching the 5th level, but the limitations of his body prevented him from reaching a higher level. Alternatively, he could improve his body using one of the methods available to him, but he was not going to risk it, because Jamie's body was too young and weak. The great magician from the past decided to be patient, because he is not limited in the time of development, because the gods will not go anywhere, and he has already gone too far to rush things. After that, with one wave of his finger, he used the invisibility ability on his pet. Since the black boy was upset by the sudden use of force on his body, Jamie explained that he wanted to meet his father, so he wanted to make sure that he did not find out about him. When he walked a little further, he was convinced that the pet's presence was too faint to realize that he was there. The guy was sure that his father would definitely not notice that he had Churnish. As soon as he approached the room where his father was, he heard that he had guests. The gentleman was surprised that such a busy man decided to visit him. The man replied that he just wanted to greet the local count. The stranger said that he knew that there had never been problems with religion in the lands of Haze, so he would like to thank the count for giving their cult of Genis a chance. In response, the swordmaster said that he believed that it would be very nice to help his population, so he decided to give their cult a similar chance. The cult member took these words ambiguously and asked what he meant. The count replied that he always strives only for the best, so he decided to make the cult of Genis the greatest in his lands, because now many people support it. The cult representative took these words as a kind of warning that the people of the land of Haze should not be considered great worshippers of the gods. He decided that he had to take the local count more seriously than expected. After this, Arjano Welton suggested ending their conversation, suggesting that the cult representative was a very busy person. As they said goodbye, they exchanged pleasant compliments and wishes. Still, the cult member understood the situation perfectly. The head of the Welton family was forced to show sympathy, although in fact he was suspicious of the emergence of their cult. Being nearby, Jamie couldn't help but look at who his father was talking to. Looking at the unexpected guest, he only justified his guesses. The crescent moon sign with a yellow orb and the dark aura emanating from the cult member told him that this was Genis. The guy was filled with anger because this god dared to extend his influence to the place where he lives. It remained a mystery to him why his father suddenly decided to make his lands religious, and why, of all the religions, he chose the cult of Genis. The great magician from the past began to get seriously nervous, because he couldn't let this happen. Due to certain circumstances limiting his freedom of action, he had few options to solve the problem. He understood that this religion was officially sanctioned by his father, so the only way to get rid of it was to make him drive them away. As soon as Jamie walked into the living room, his father's mood changed. With a smile on his face, Master Arjano asked how his son was doing. Jamie happily replied that he had dealt with everything. In response, the man suggested that his son really liked magic. Jamie confirmed his words. But instead of joy for his son, Arjuna thought about something. Jamie decided to ask if everything was okay. In response, the Count said that he thought that he would grow up like an ordinary child. The fact is that he understood that living the life of a genius is not such a simple thing. When a child shows his talent, everyone begins to applaud him. However, when everyone gets tired of this talent, the same people begin to bully this child, so he was not sure whether his genius was truly a gift of fate, or vice versa. The thought of this made him nervous and move on to a more serious conversation. Addressing his son, he said that if he does not like doing magic, then he can leave this business and start doing something else. But if this decision is final, then he will not contradict him, and, as a father, will help in every way he can. With a carefree smile, Jamie asked him not to worry, confidently saying that he would never give up magic. The son's intentions were clear, so Arjuna did not object. And yet, looking at him more closely, he did not understand how a 9-year-old boy could have so much mana. He could already feel the mana emanating from his entire body. But as soon as he realized that his son's magic was stored not only in his heart, but also in other parts of his body, he was in complete shock. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, so he asked how much his son had learned from the memoirs that Master Marcus had provided him. The guy calmly replied that he had managed to master all the knowledge that was shared with him. In fact, he also improved some of the techniques described in that book, but he could not admit it, so as not to arouse suspicion. Now Mr. Welton realized the full seriousness of what Marcus had told him. Seeing such a transformation in the distribution of mana, it was hard for him to imagine how much this child could learn in just one night. Now he had no doubt that Jamie was truly the one who could become the legendary magician of the 9th grade. It seemed to him that compared to his own son, he was a complete non-entity. An awkward laugh surprised the guy, and he asked if everything was okay. The father replied that he laughed only because at that moment he was especially proud of his son. Masterfully playing his role, the great magician laughed in response. Next, Mr. Arjuna Welton carefully stroked his head. At that moment, the great magician felt awkward because given his true age, he could not get used to being treated like a child. After this loving gesture, the father suddenly pointed his finger at his son's hidden pet and asked if he had managed to summon it himself. Hearing this, Jamie got scared and hesitantly asked if his father could really see him. He didn't understand how this was possible, because he made sure that he had cast invisibility on the little black one, and even checked how difficult it was to sense his presence. The father closed his eyes and, imagining the pet, showed its approximate size and suggested that it was something similar to a bat, but with a more rounded body. Jamie really didn't expect his father to be so advanced in sensing mana. He still hoped that he didn't realize what the pet was doing with dark magic. As soon as Mr. Weldon found out that his son had made this bat with his own hands, he attacked him with a big hug and again shouted that he was proud of his success. Jamie was devastated as he left the living room. He is incredibly tired of his parents loving him so much. After another tiring dinner, the guy returned to his room and locked the door. That evening, he decided to take action. Wearing a long cloak with a hood to hide his true identity, the guy summoned his pet, which without further ado took on a winged form. The great magician could not allow the cult to be located on his territory, so he decided to find out their motives on his own. To do this, he used the power of his pet and left the mansion to check the events in the city. Members of the criminal organization Laval were operating in one of the alleys of their city. The guy with purple long hair named Philip was a little nervous because of the boss's order. His comrade Jans agreed with his fears, believing that the boss would make any sacrifice just to achieve his own goals. The man with the scar on his right eye understood that the local count allowed their organization to coexist peacefully with everyone only until they crossed a certain line. But he was sure that everything would come to an end as soon as they began to carry out the human trafficking plan. In response, Philip said that if they were lucky, they could escape quietly and no one would catch them. Since it was a matter of luck, his comrade could not accept such risks. Remembering the Count's love for his own children, Jans declared that they would end as soon as he learned that they were using other children to trade on his own lands. He understood that if this happened, then all criminal organizations would be destroyed by the hands of one of the strongest sword masters in the kingdom. In response, Philip suggested that their boss was simply confident that they would not be caught. But Jans believed that jokes with the swordmaster were bad and would not lead to anything good. They didn't have much options. Philip believed that they could save themselves either by escaping or by surrendering their boss to the police. Nevertheless, they agreed on the idea of escaping so as not to violate the rule of the underworld, which states that people who have a certain responsibility in the mission should under no circumstances surrender the organization or reveal their plan of action to third parties. Jans asked if his comrade could suggest some kind of plan, given that no matter how large these lands are, the boss's people will search every corner to find them. Philip replied that it was better to take a risk, because it was simply impossible to avoid the wrath of the Sword Master. They simply had no other way to survive except to escape. While they were discussing how crazy it was to engage in the slave trade in this place, they were already being followed. Of course, it was Jamie, and he heard everything they were talking about. At one point, he decided to show himself, and the guys realized that their plan was now at risk of failure. Jans immediately asked who was the one who interfered in their affairs. In response, the young magician arrogantly said that the bandits were in no position to ask questions. His words got on the nerves of the self-confident Jans. He shouted that if the stranger decided to remain silent, then he was finished. Both bandits rushed to attack, but as soon as they tried to strike, their enemy suddenly disappeared. Looking around, they could not see where he had gone. Within a moment, they began to feel such strong fear that they could not move. The same stranger appeared right in front of them, and in a terrifying voice asked what they were talking about. An incredible amount of mana surrounded him, extending his hand towards them. He said with an evil smile that he would like to hear more details. Within a moment, the technique of dark magic began to influence the minds of the bandits, so that they could not move. As a result, Philip and Jans completely obeyed the young magician. They told everything they knew about this mission. Jamie was surprised that those guys decided to do what his father despises most. It seemed strange to him that those idiots would hope to succeed in such a matter while being in a land where a great sword master was a count. What irritated him most of all was the fact that now not only the gods manipulate people as they please, but people themselves dared to do something similar, no different from those disgusting creatures. It also seemed strange that the boss of these bandits would decide to do something like that, even though he probably knew his father's character very well. He had an extremely bad feeling about all this. Using dark magic, Jamie began to use mind control again. He ordered these guys to go to the Count's estate and tell him everything they knew. The bandits, who fell under the influence of magic, unconditionally began to carry out the order. The young master understood that the morning on their estate was going to be stormy. He managed to do a good job of pushing his father to investigate the activities of certain groups that are associated with the occultists. Having done all that was necessary, Jamie once again turned to using his pet's wings to return home. But a moment later, 2 bodies flew past him. Looking around, he realized that these were the same guys he had used to tell his father the plan of the cult. Afterwards, the culprits of his failure appeared. There were 4 people, but the most suspicious was the stormy man in the middle. Jamie thought he had already done it, but because of some crazy person, the work only increased. Using dark magic again, Jamie asked the stranger how he dared to touch the people who were following his orders. After that, a huge seal appeared behind him. Using his magic, he said that he forbade his charges to die until they carried out his instructions. After this, the bodies of the recently mortally wounded bandits began to recover, filling with the mana of their new master. An employee of the rival criminal organization named Han Ni was surprised that another person was involved in this case. So he asked his wards to drag those 2 unfaithful guys and a strange guy in a raincoat to his feet. To hurry up his bandits, he threatened them with violence if they did not begin to carry out the order. The young master was surprised by the bandits' self-confidence. They stole the bodies of traitors to their organization right before his eyes. With tears in his eyes, Philip asked a magician he did not know to help him. The cruelty of the criminals who live on his father's lands drove Jamie crazy. He hatedly called Han Ni a scoundrel and asked how he dared to do such a thing on these lands. With loud death threats, the criminal used magic and attacked Jamie, hitting him in the head. With a terrifying thirst for blood, he continued to attack the body of an unfamiliar magician who had interfered in the affairs of their organization. Using his strength, the self-confident villain completely destroyed the body of the guy in the cloak. But at the same moment, the ward, scared to death, asked what harm their brother Finn had done to him. Han Ni did not understand what he was talking about because he dealt all these furious blows to the stranger. Within a moment, Jamie appeared next to him and asked if this was really all he was capable of. The frightened Han Ni was frightened by the terrifying voice and looked around, asking what was going on. After that, with a scary look, Jamie asked if it was fun to kill his partner. Shocked by what was happening, the villain realized that if his opponent was still alive, then all those attacks he carried out were aimed at someone else. In addition, it was the first time in his life that he had seen such an ominous aura emanating from the magician's body. Within a moment, Jamie was right in the face of his opponent and said intimidatingly that the villain was taking on too much, being only a third-class magician. As expected, such words greatly hurt his opponent's pride. Realizing the danger of the situation, Han Ni resorted to using a third-class spell called Buster. He believed that although it could not compare with a fifth-class magical explosion, it would be enough to incinerate the stranger's small body, thereby leaving no traces. But as soon as he tried to use his power, he found himself under the complete control of the young master, who suggested that he listen to one thing about how the human mind works. By controlling the senses and body of his enemy, Jamie eerily said that people feel completely helpless when faced with those who are many times stronger than them. He admitted to his puppet that this is precisely why he loves to manipulate those who are much weaker than himself. Although the great mage of the past, Diablo Wolfer, had not yet been able to regain even a small part of his former strength, he easily subdued this third-level mage. With no chance of resistance, Han Ni fell face first onto the surface. The wards of this villain were simply shocked that the little magician easily defeated the leader of their group. Realizing that there was a real monster in front of them, the trembling bandits decided to flee, but it was already too late. Using his power, Jamie said that they should take this defeat as ordinary bad luck. Within a moment, the dark magic of the young master captured the bodies of the villains. Clenching his fist, Diablo Wolfer used destruction magic. Having dealt with the minor villains, he returned to their group leader. Raising Han Ni's head as he lay on the ground, he ordered him to answer all his questions. The third-level magician completely submitted to the will of his new master, having lost control over his body and mind. He repeated the same thing as the previous guys. True, Jamie had already heard this and was wasting his time, because this information should be conveyed by Philip and Jans. The question that remained was what to do with Han Ni. Although the magician stopped his death, his soul was almost destroyed, so he was unlikely to be able to hold out for much longer. Since he is only a third-class mage, he can be turned into an undead. But if this is done, he will quickly become unusable due to his soul. On the battlefield, such an undead would look quite normal, but using it in a peaceful place seemed far from the best idea. Based on the circumstances, the brilliant Jamie decided to use a different method. The third-level mage is a vessel of a good amount of mana. The guy took advantage of the situation and absorbed his powers. Due to his human characteristics, the mana was overflowing with impurities, but that was not bad. Diablo Wolfer did not expect that at that age, he would be able to consume such an amount of mana. The second question was how to deal with ridiculous charges. The magician had already given them some of his mana, but he understood that they were unlikely to be able to hold out in this state for long. I had to turn to the abilities of the little black one. Those guys had unfinished business, so Diablo Wolfer gave them a chance to enjoy life a little longer. He turned to necromancy, an ability that allows him to revive the dead, but with some peculiarities. In fact, a person resurrected by this power is a complete contradiction to the laws of nature. From that moment on, his servants took on a new appearance. They were ordered to live despite the fact that they had already died once. Now they were ready to carry out orders. Although Jamie was able to use the ability of necromancy from his previous life, this time there were some strange things. Some black smoke remained around the bodies of his servants, and the guy thought that he might have made some mistake. Blackie began to get nervous and squeak pitifully, fearing that it was he who was to blame. Dissatisfied with his behavior, Jamie asked not to take everything to heart and not to think too much. The guy thought that his pet actually did everything perfectly. Trying to calm himself down, he played with it like a rubber toy, guessing that he himself had done something wrong. Diablo Wolfer was depressed, as he found it hard to admit that he had made a mistake in using magic. Usually, he doesn't get attached to his past achievements, but this time it was still a shame that his skills were starting to be lost. Because of this strange and suspicious aura, he understood that their use was impossible, and they would attract the attention of the guards, so the only way out of the situation was to simply get rid of the unsuccessful servants. In addition, returning to the cult of Genus will also not be possible, because their magic users will also suspect something. But the little black one did not agree with his reasoning. The dark pet sat on the magician's shoulder and began to behave very strangely. Jamie yelled at him for starting to bite his master's cheeks. It turned out that he just wanted to attract attention to himself before proceeding to resolve the issue. Sitting on Jans's head, he began to absorb the dark aura that surrounded his body. Diablo Wolfer had never seen a pet do something like this before. As it turned out, he had no need to absorb excess mana, because in a past life, the owner's magic was more rational. The small black creature barely absorbed the entire volume of the dark aura of the undead. Now Philip and Jans were ready to carry out orders. But the situation has improved. Blackie was simply filled with mana and felt a certain heaviness. The young master thanked him for his work and praised him for successfully correcting the spell error. Next, it was time to name your first two servants. Jans received the new name Azard, while Philip acquired the name Rise. The young master approached his servants, but their reaction indicated that they did not understand what was happening at all. Jamie decided to give them some time to come to their senses. After a few minutes of silence, the undead began to look at the world around them more adequately. Azard was the first to start the dialogue. He assumed that in front of him was the person who brought him back to life. Jamie powerfully confirmed his suspicions. Azard could reason from his previous experience, so he was shocked that in front of him was such a powerful magician who looked no more than 10 years old. In addition, he noticed his huge and ominous aura. It seemed to him that this was some character from a book he had read when he was little. The young master looked like an ominous creature that should not exist in the world. He felt that this magician could challenge the whole world himself. Of course, Diablo Wolfer couldn't help but notice his fear. He guessed that the servant thought his master looked like a demon lord. His words turned out to be an accurate description of how he was perceived by these guys. Rise gathered all his determination together, because he no longer had anything to lose. He loudly stated that he had no idea who was in front of them, but in his eyes, the young master definitely didn't look human. Jamie was surprised by his reaction. The servant was acting too aggressively, and it seemed that he did not understand that his master was in front of him. He suggested that there were some flaws in his spell, but that didn't mean he would just turn a blind eye to it. With one wave of his fingers, he demonstrated his superior strength, and Rise instantly found himself face down on the surface. When Jamie began to walk towards him, the servant's whole body began to tremble from the inability to resist. With an intimidating look, the young master said that he would forgive the servant just this once, but threatened that if he raised his voice at him again, he would not get away with it. The chilling speech made the former villain take his words seriously. After communicating with one servant, the young master warned the second that this also concerned him. This is what the subjugation of the souls of dead people is. It didn't matter whether they wanted it or not, but as long as they were bound by the contract, their lives belonged to the magician. This is the whole essence of the dark magic that Diablo Wolfer used. Before leaving, the guy remembered an important detail. He asked the servants not to think that he was a demon lord. Polite Hazard asked permission to find out who their master was. With a sweet and harmless expression on his face, the young master called himself an ordinary dark magician, although he could not clarify that he was also the one who once tried to kill the gods, and having been reborn into a new body, he considers this goal his only reason for existence. Trying to keep a low profile, he ordered his servants to keep an eye on the Church of Genis and gather all information related to it. In addition, he wanted anyone who might know something about human trafficking to be brought to him. He wanted him to be the one to tell his father everything for them. Faithful Rise and Azard bowed to the young master. When there was silence, they looked up. It turned out that the young master had already left. At that moment, they were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. After looking at each other, they began to remain awkwardly silent. The guys understood that they could not disobey the owner's order, so they decided to do as he said. Returning home, the little black one began to worry about the undead, but Jamie assured him that everything would be fine with them because they were too scared, so they could not easily disobey his orders. In addition, those guys will give information to his father so that he can personally solve the problem of the slave trade. Afraid of getting involved in trouble, the pet again began to pull the master's cheeks, and dissatisfied with this treatment, Jamie explained that he could not continue to allow the cult of Genis to do this on his lands. Jamie invited the little black one to return to the mansion, but something unexpected happened. The magician did not even notice how someone suddenly approached them, after which they hit his back. The stranger himself was surprised that he managed to crash into someone in the middle of an empty road. The young master was a little furious about the situation. Looking at the stranger, he called him blind, after which he was surprised that he was also a child. In response, the stranger shouted that the impudent young man was still also a child. Diablo Wolfer felt uneasy when he remembered that he was really only 9 years old. Turning around, he arrogantly said that this time he would let the stranger go, after which he asked him to be more careful in the future. The strange behavior and speech of the same boy tensed the stranger. In response, he furiously whispered under his breath that the impudent guy thought he was an adult, although he didn't even have a single gray hair on his head. As soon as the little black one heard this, he jumped on his master's head and transformed his hairstyle. Jamie was surprised by the sudden commotion. After looking around, he realized that the reason for his pet's behavior was the words of an offended child. Blackie did this only because the stranger joked about his hair color. Diablo Wolfer did not understand how Blackie dared to climb on his head and where his manners disappeared. Still, he decided to take this situation more seriously, so he turned to the boy in a terrifying voice and threatened that he should watch his language if his life was dear to him. Apologizing, the stranger began to run away. Having fulfilled the wish of his restless pet, Jamie calmly returned home. Still, the guy decided to punish his pet. Chernish felt guilty, while the owner asked him to think about his action, after which he warned that if he did something like that again, he would not get off so easily. Nevertheless, the beast, summoned by dark magic, forgot about manners due to the long absence of his master. Falling face first into the pillow, Jamie sighed heavily, tired because he had used more strength than he had originally thought. He understood that now he would have much more to do, and his easy and carefree life would come to an end. Yet an enemy will soon appear on his lands. This is the god he hates most, Genis. Even though Diablo Wolfer had not yet been able to regain even a fraction of his former strength, he did not care how strong the enemy cult would be. He promised that this time he would get rid of all enemies completely. Meanwhile, Azard and Rees arrived at the villain's lair. One of his comrades was shocked that he was still alive, while his new master's servant asked to know where the elder was. That frightened guy could not understand why his comrades were still alive, because Han Ni was going to personally get rid of them. He couldn't believe that guys who didn't have magic were able to defeat a third-level magician, but Hazard had no intention of playing with old friendships. He defiantly smashed the wall near the head of his old comrade with his bare fist, and said that he would not repeat his words twice. The villain named Pip did not understand what had happened. He did not see the rest of his comrades, who would certainly have caused a major scandal if they had found out that Jans had returned. The confused villain understood that these guys had dealt with the rest of the bandits, so in order not to risk his own life, he assured them that he didn't even have a clue where his older brother had gone. But a moment later, he was shocked to learn that Philip also survived. The rebel Philip, with the new name Rise, asked if Pip was sure of what he was saying. Confused Pip, without even thinking about what he was saying, said with a trembling voice that he was not lying, and this could be clarified with the others. True, the rest were already dead, but oh well. By the look of Rise, it was clear that he was furious. He was already fed up with everything. He needed to find his old boss in order to carry out the master's order, since the elder brother knows about everything that is happening in the city, so there is a great chance that he has some information about the Church of Ganis. Turning seriously to his old comrade, he asked him his own opinion about where the boss might be. Scared to death, Pip understood that he needed to give them some kind of normal answer, because otherwise they would immediately blow his head off. In a frightened voice, he suggested that since the boss liked girls and liked to drink, then he could explore all the bars that were nearby. Hazard and Rise agreed that this was a pretty good idea, so they decided to go to the nearest bars, seeing the guys leaving Pip sighed with relief. But a moment later, Hazard punched him in the face pretty well. He returned because he remembered the gentleman's request to find any witness. It seemed to him that Pip was suitable for this role, but did not know where to hide him, so he suggested that he could simply tie up the poor fellow and throw him in the forest nearby. Rise praised his option, but said it would be easier to lock it in the basement of the house. They spent too much time gathering information, so they decided to hurry up and find the boss. Meanwhile, one of those who were absent during the actions of Azard and Rise returned to their lair. Looking around, the guy could not understand what had happened. All the guys around were unconscious. The child Jamie encountered on the street worked for these bandits and thought that he would be beaten again because he did not fulfill the quota. But as it turned out, he was no longer in danger. In this case, he decided not to risk his own life and ran away so that the others would not suspect anything. The next morning, Jamie woke up later than usual. This was not surprising, since he had to begin his actions, and it turned out to be tiring. He understood that now he would not be able to avoid meeting his enemies. On the way to the dining room, he apologized to his pet that he was going to call him away so that he would not catch the eye of his father. As soon as he approached the entrance, he asked his parents how they slept. With a smile on his face, Arjuna wished his son good morning. In response, Jamie was surprised that his mother had not yet arrived. As it turned out, she was hiding behind the door and suddenly jumped out at her son. Acting out the role of a cute child, an excited Jamie asked how she was able to hide so unnoticed. Of course, this question was played out. Mom started laughing because her son was scared by her joke, but the guy boldly declared that he instantly came to order when he realized that it was his beloved mom. After that, his mother and sister hugged him, continuing to talk about their love. Then they started breakfast, and this time Sarah sat next to her parents, and not her brother. Mom continued to hug her and play even at the table, showing a huge amount of love for the child. Watching this, Diablo Wolfer thought that he himself wouldn't mind touching his little sister's cheeks, because children's cheeks are always soft. But as soon as he realized what he was thinking about, he nervously hit his head on the table, realizing that a great magician who was going to destroy the gods should not get used to such a quiet life. After finishing breakfast, the parents began to discuss their plans. Noticing this, Jamie wondered what would happen the next day. The father was surprised that the children did not know yet. The mother made the excuse that because her son made her worry, she completely forgot about it. Most likely, she was referring to Jamie's technique, which he used to accumulate mana. Knowing her character, he understood that she was very worried about him. Like a polite and well-mannered son, Jamie apologized with guilt for such behavior. Mom carefully replied that she understood that nothing would happen to him, but after a moment, she began to show her excitement and stated that if her son continued to exhaust himself like this, then she might faint somewhere in the corridor because she would become too sad. After another apology, Jamie decided to return to the previous issue, and as it turned out, the Welton family were going to go to the ball together. It will be a huge ball, organized by Earl Simon and Earl Welton, and almost all the nobles living in the north of the Seldom Empire will be present. Mommy was happy that the children would attend such a noble event for the first time, while Diablo Wolfer understood that his precious free time would soon end. The evening of another boring day has arrived. After dinner, the young master again used his pet's wings to visit his servants. Previously, he indicated to them the meeting place, so he went to one of the buildings in the city. As soon as the master entered, his servant stood up from the table. Removing the hood, Jamie asked if they had done what he asked. Feeling guilty, an emotional Rise apologized for the fact that they were never able to find out anything about the genus cult, since it was created not so long ago. Hearing his answer, Diablo Wolfer realized that even the members of Laval were unable to obtain any information in just one day. After that, he inquired about the progress regarding the second assignment. Everything was fine with the second assignment, and the guys introduced their friend named Pip to the master. As soon as that guy saw the color of the young man's hair, he immediately realized that the Welton family itself was taking care of their affairs. Rise introduced Pip as one of the members of Laval's cult, who in fact knew that Han Ni was going to kill them. They thought that this only proved that this guy was not an ordinary pawn. Since Pip didn't say anything, Jamie decided to conduct the interrogation using his own methods. To begin with, he asked to untie the prisoner's mouth. As soon as they did this, Pip took a deep breath of air. After that, he began screaming to beg the gentleman to spare his life, saying that he knew nothing, but would get any information if he was released. Looking up, he couldn't understand why he was trembling so much at the sight of some child. As it turned out, he felt an endless amount of its terrifying power. In response, Jamie said that he had no reason to kill him, and that he just wanted the prisoner to carry out his orders. Lowering his head, Pip tearfully shouted that he would do whatever he was ordered to do, even find the boss in order for his life to be spared. After young Mr. Welton called the poor guy too loud, he was speechless. Then, Diablo Wolfer put his hand on the villain's head, and using his dark magic, gave him the order to go to the Count's estate and tell him about everything that their organization was doing. When the guy got to his feet, it became clear that he no longer controlled his consciousness. He silently left Reese's house and walked towards the Welton family's mansion. Addressing the servants, Jamie asked them not to worry about the prisoner, saying that the Lival organization was unlikely to catch him. At least he was sure that his father would be the first to deal with him. Then he ordered the guys to leave the city and hide somewhere. Noticing such a reaction, the little black one whispered something in his owner's ear. Jamie agreed with his remark and asked the guys in surprise why they were not interested in the reasons for such an order. Bowing low, the servants replied that the master's orders are the law and they cannot disobey them. After this, Rise admitted that he most likely understood their master's motives. Most likely, they guessed what situation they were in, because after hearing information about the plans of the criminals, Mr. Welton would probably destroy the Lival organization and would like him not to find out about the existence of Rise and Hazard. As Jamie left the building, he warned the servants that he would be gone for several days, so the boys should be quiet until he returned. Doubts continued to worry the guys, and Rise ran out into the street. He shouted after his master. Jamie turned around and asked the servant in surprise what had happened. As it turned out, Philip's personality wanted to know who they ended up becoming. He knew that they were dead, and also that there was no way to fix it. Besides, he didn't even want to go back to his previous life. He was sincerely glad that he had become stronger. But he could not have peace until he knew what kind of creature he had become. Rise surprised the young master with his curiosity. He assumed that he was now a top-ranking undead. In response, Jamie began to laugh and Rise felt awkward, which is why he apologized for his stupid question. But the young master clarified that he was laughing because people usually ask whether they have become undead or not, while Rise surprised him with his easy perception of reality. These guys seemed like an unusual find to him. Diablo Wolfer had never met such servants. Usually everyone refused to accept that they had become monsters and had lost their humanity. But Rise and Hazard looked like they could be really valuable players. Nevertheless, the young master explained to the guys that now they are the most ordinary zombies because he saved their appearances before they died. After they became zombies, their strength also increased, so now they are much more powerful than ordinary people. Still, this news upset Rise a little, and he hoped that at least after death he would gain special power. To support them, the young master said with a smile on his face that everything depended only on them, and perhaps they would someday become top-level zombies. Of course, such a speech greatly inspired the guys. Then the gentleman and his roomers politely said goodbye. Returning home after a long walk, Jamie asked his pet not to consider his servants pathetic. He thought they were quite interesting and very reminiscent of a certain person from his past life. That night, the Welton household was in turmoil as one of the members of Laval, a huge criminal organization based in Hayes, decided to betray his own association. The Count had to stay late to deal with some matters. Therefore, only 3 of his family went to Regan, the largest city located in the east. In fact, Jamie could already get to this place using only the teleportation skill, but he decided not to attract too much attention and used the usual transport. He was already much stronger than before. In addition, thanks to the study of the old man's book, he learned that magic has made incredible progress and is now radically different from what it was in his time. But the problem is that he has no idea how much time has passed since his death. The events that took place after his death were described in history books. They mentioned an army of demons attacking humans led by a demon lord. Despite some very high-profile events, there have been no wars for the last several hundred years. Considering all this, it could be said that a long time had passed since his previous life. Analyzing the situation, Diablo Wolfer understood that his enemies were never able to unite. For him, it was even better because apart, they are much weaker. But for the immediate future, their family's ball was the priority. As soon as they entered the city, Jamie could not hide his surprise at its beauty. Mom explained with a smile that this is the most advanced city in their kingdom, and it is impossible to find a place through which such a huge amount of money passes as through Regan. Now Jamie understood why their support had such a strong impact on the development of the center of their lands. After some time, they almost arrived at the palace. Jamie continued to act modest and admitted that he wanted to see Count Simon so much that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. As usual, hugging her son tightly, the mother called him cute and asked him not to worry. She assumed that Jamie admired Uncle Simon so much because he too wanted to become a magician. In response, tired of her hugs, he agreed with her words. Mom explained to her son that Count Simon is simply incredible, because being the same age as his father, he was already a 7th-grade magician, and along with him is one of the 2 leaders of the Eastern Council of the Kingdom's nobility, and he is also the lord of the city of Regan. The magic of the local city, according to people, is similar to the Red Lotus, which is why he was called the Red Lotus Magician. They say that with one spell he can kill 1,000 people at once. Hearing this, Jamie asked what kind of person the Count was. Mom thought deeply before answering the question. The first thing that came to her mind was to say that the Count's hair was as red as his blood. In fact, the young master didn't care about these things. But the power by which the Count could take so many lives was what really interested him in his conversation with Simon. His conversation with Marcus Linmel was a bit useless because it was too short. So he hoped that with the help of the Count he could find out more about modern magic. Mom was the first to get out of the carriage, and then she called the children. They had already been met by the polite butler of this mansion. He assumed that this was the wife of Count Welton. Having convinced himself of this, he offered to escort them to their chambers. The chambers for their entire event were simply huge. The butler also said that if they had any wishes, they could contact him. The guests admired Count Simon's care. They even allocated a separate room for the young gentleman. Jamie was glad for such attentiveness, since he could not even imagine how difficult it would be to be with his family all this time. Addressing the children, the mother asked them to take things apart and returned to her. A few minutes later, she was already the center of attention of the maids. They took care of her hair for the ball. The woman looked simply incredible, and her son could not help but express his admiration. Hearing this, my mother was very happy with his words. In front of the maids, she demonstrated the relationships within their family. The mother almost pounced on her son to hug him, but one of the maids politely asked the madam to control herself, otherwise her hair might lose its look. She seemed to take it too personally and couldn't believe that now she couldn't hug her beloved children. Meanwhile, young Mrs. Sears also finished her preparations. As expected, the mum could hardly contain her emotions, while Jamie said Sarah looked like a doll. The girl was especially pleased with her older brother's compliment. Still, they both agreed that these clothes were not very comfortable, but agreed that they would tolerate it in this form until the very end of the holiday. In the end, Jamie was also forced to change his look a bit. Then they went to the banquet hall of Count Simon's castle. Everyone was surprised by the incredible size of this hall, and Jamie wondered if ballrooms always looked so luxurious. Sitting down in his place, the guy asked whether Count Simon really loved luxury so much. Mom replied that this was so, and most likely her son would be even more surprised when he met him in person. Then 2 beautiful ladies approached Madame Welton and immediately noticed her incredible appearance and gorgeous dress. Watching these fake conversations made Jamie feel disgusted, realizing that they were actually trying to suck up to their family. He had met many people like them in the past. In times not mentioned in history, such people flattered the gods whom he hated so much. Although this sight was disgusting, Jamie understood that his mother knew how to behave with such people. Meanwhile, the greeting of all visitors to Count Simon's castle began. The host of the ball, Rayval Banner, introduced himself to them, who is also a member of the administrative bodies of the city of Regan. The entire hall immediately paid attention to him. With a smile on his face, Rayval stated that the ball would begin soon, and it was time to take their seats. After this, he asked the visitors to prepare to welcome Count Simon and his entire family, who would be here any minute. A few minutes later, the organizer of the celebration appeared. Of course, the appearance of such an incredible magician brought the young master to his senses. He could not help but notice the pressure in the air from the appearance of an advanced master. A man with red hair greeted everyone present. The 7th grade mage impressed the young master with his presence. Count Simon hoped that everyone would enjoy the event. While everyone was discussing the appearance of the ball organizer, Jamie could not sit still. He was surprised that Count Simon was almost on the same level as the great magician Marcus Linmel, or even stronger. The Red Lotus mage truly exceeded all his expectations, and the guy was looking forward to their conversation. At the same moment, the Welton family was approached by the family of the local count. As expected, Mrs. Welton exchanged polite greetings with them. The magician was surprised that his fellow swordmaster had not arrived. Then he learned that Mr. Argino would be closer to the knight, as he had some problems. After this, the count turned his attention to the children of his comrade. The caring mother introduced her son. After that, she introduced her daughter, Sarah. The children politely expressed their admiration for this event. Mrs. Simon could not help but be surprised at how sweet and well-mannered Mr. Argino's children were. While the two mistresses were talking to each other, the two magicians began to take a closer look at each other. Jamie was not interested in the ball, but the identity of the Red Lotus magician seemed very intriguing to him. In addition, he noticed how the count looked through every corner of his body. This was exactly what the young master wanted, so he fueled the count's interest in his personality and even showed good possession of mana. This demonstration aroused the interest of the great magician. He decided to personally meet the interesting child. Jamie said with a smile on his face that he admired the count's exploits. After this, the Red Lotus magician came closer to him and suggested that they talk later in a calmer environment. As soon as they agreed, the man interested in the talented young man decided to go further. The young master was satisfied. The count exceeded all his expectations, and he looked forward to their second meeting. The host of the event invited visitors to feel at home and enjoy the evening. Those present began to rise from their tables to find interlocutors and make good connections. Meanwhile, one red-haired youth took a closer look at the child of another noble family. Of course, he was interested in Jamie Welton. At Count Simon's table sat his wife and two sons. One of them asked his father what he thought about the son of Earl Welton. When asked what interested him in a 10-year-old child, the young master of the family, Simon, replied that although Mr. Jamie is young now, he will become the head of the family in the future, and it would be nice for them, as peers, to get to know each other. At that moment, the Count remembered the rumors that his son was showing leadership qualities among noble children. It seemed stupid to him that his son was trying to gain recognition in this way. However, he didn't mind playing along a little, so he called his son wise beyond his years. When asked by his son if he could tell anything else, the Count decided to remain silent. Instead of answering, he simply asked for an aperitif, thereby demonstrating that he was not going to give his youngest son any hints. The mother volunteered to support her son. She gently and caringly placed her hand on his arm, and then asked him to get along with young Master Welton, since their families had been allies for a long time. With a sly smile, the guy agreed with his mother. Miss Simon was glad that the matter had been resolved. After that, she decided to join the meal. But the young master continued to experience some tension. He was ashamed in front of his mother, because in fact he did not even intend to get along with the son of the Welton family. He couldn't wait to make the noble child of the Welton family crawl on his knees in front of him. All this was just for one purpose. He hoped that this would gain his father's recognition. The younger brother noticed his sly smile. He understood what was going on and looked forward to interesting events. The ball continued, and the Welton family decided to leave the table. Mom asked her son to be polite and be sure to make friends with everyone. As soon as she walked away, Jamie felt relieved. He had no interest in dating youngsters, so he decided to spend this time wisely alone. Hoping to find a secluded place in this mansion, he went outside. Looking around, he saw incredible gardens, and realized that magic was not the only advantage of the Simon family. He thought about how the Count was able to reach such a high level. A moment later, he heard an unfamiliar voice behind him. Someone quietly approached him behind him. Because of this, the guy without hesitation turned to using magic. But as it turned out, he threatened some girl his age with his thunder spear. The young master behaved extremely rudely. Seeing that there was an ordinary girl in front of him, he canceled the effect of his magic. The little girl sighed heavily after such an unexpected greeting. Then she asked, with a trembling voice, whether it was possible to attack so suddenly. Jamie infuriated her with his response, saying that she had snuck up on him too suddenly. The young master continued to behave unexpectedly rudely, and without unnecessary manners, asked who she was and how she managed to sneak up on him. The girl's eyes began to sparkle. She thought that the young master was interested in her, but she doubted whether to tell him her name or not, saying that after his action, I somehow didn't want to communicate. As expected, Jamie found her speech unpleasant, as did the fact that she could suddenly appear behind his back. Still, he continued to act rudely and used his magic, shooting it near his leg. The girl was frightened by his behavior. The heir of the Welton family introduced this technique as air bullet, second-level magic. He warned that if her magical defense was not sufficiently developed, then such an attack would pass right through her and, most likely, for a little thing like her, it would be fatal. The girl just wanted to meet the polite son of the Welton family, but she began to realize that she was dealing with a real psycho. Turning to the poor fellow, Jamie asked whether he should continue. The girl, in a panic, told him to stop. The situation forced her to stop being mysterious. She admitted that her name was Ash Vale. As it turns out, this is the eldest daughter of Viscount Vale, who is a summoner of spirits. Summoners are those magicians who have entered into a contract with the mysterious spirits of nature. There are not many summoners on the continent. They are considered outstanding magicians and can lay claim to the title of Baron. This explained the fact that she was able to silently get close to him. Jamie assumed that she used the spirit of the wind, because this was possible in his past life. What was more surprising was that she was the same age as him, but already a summoner. Usually, to unite with nature, people begin to study at the age of 10, but this girl apparently was born a genius, and when she starts studying, she will most likely be able to enter into a contract with the so-called king. After Miss Valley introduced herself, she asked the rude man to hurry up and introduce himself, because it was a mystery to her who dared to use such dangerous magic inside the Simon family palace. The guy was surprised by her question. He couldn't believe that she would try to interrogate him after revealing her identity. Judging by her character, he understood that she did not like to lose. Ash wanted to know who she was dealing with. Nevertheless, Jamie decided to satisfy her interest and introduced himself as the heir of Earl Welton. Hearing this, Ash was shocked, because in fact the Vale family are loyal vassals of Count Welton. Meanwhile, Mr. Argino had already managed to deal with the rival organization. Grabbing their leader, he admitted that his gang was annoying, but he didn't touch them, because that's all they did. Besides, sometimes they were even useful. Lifting his head with his boot, he furiously asked why they decided to repay his kindness by engaging in human trafficking. With a cold look, he stated that on his lands either a madman or someone who was tired of living could have taken on this. Believing that the rival leader wished to die, Mr. Welton promised that he would fulfill his wish. As expected, the leader of the criminal gang begged for mercy, but the trembling of his body did not evoke pity from Mr. Argino. Addressing his charges, he asked to get rid of the villain. The wards accepted his order unconditionally. Then he asked that the cart be prepared for immediate departure. Mr. Welton went to the ball. At the same time, his charges led the criminals to the place of execution. Meanwhile, they were already being followed by the true masterminds of human trafficking. Laval's organization failed them, so they had to start Plan B. The Welton family's young master continued to walk around the Simon family's palace, but he couldn't concentrate on his thoughts. He couldn't have privacy because of the intrusive Ash, so he got mad and nervously asked why she was following him. Jamie said that if her father was his father's vassal, it didn't mean anything. He asked the shy girl to stop communicating with him as if they were in a business relationship. As soon as he asked to be left alone and decided to leave, the girl grabbed his hand. Thus, she only pissed him off even more. Looking into her eyes, he asked her directly why she pestered him. The shy girl replied that she had met someone her age for the first time, so she wanted to make friends with him. Hearing this, the guy was confused. Silence began between them, because he didn't even think that this was the reason. He could still assume that she was talking about a servant, but he had no idea why she needed a friend in the first place. Sighing heavily, he thought that friends were very important for children her age. At the same time, he believed that this was not his problem, because such a friendship could take up too much of his time. Jamie decided to go further and advised her to find someone else, since he himself does not need friends. With tears in her eyes, Ash asked him to stop and called him a pest. Still, he managed to retire. He thought that she was still a child and did not understand that friendship, like any relationship, was irrational. He judged based on his past mistakes. Diablo Wolfer believed that if he had immediately gotten rid of such feelings, then in his past life, he would not have had to experience something terrible. This situation ruined his mood, because of it, he remembered something unpleasant. His solitude suddenly came to an end as he was once again distracted by his peers. This time it was 3 guys, with a red-haired young master standing in front of them. Seeing them, Jamie immediately realized that in such a daring tone, he was addressed by someone who was most likely the son of Count Simon. Instead of introducing himself to him, he asked him to repeat his address. One of the young master's impudent comrades, Simon, displeasedly asked how Welton dared address their brother in such a disrespectful tone. The second guy clarified that Jamie should have realized that Mr. Alf was in front of him. After that, they both shouted that this was the son and heir of Count Simon's family. In response, Jamie, with a sly smile, called them too noisy and cast a spell of silence. At the same moment, the two impudent guys were speechless. The Simon family's young master was confused by what happened. Confused, Alpha asked in an uncertain tone if he had actually cast a silencing spell on them. With a joyful laugh, Jamie was surprised that young Master Simon had heard of him and suggested that in that case, he was better than those naive monkeys. Calling the young master of the Welton family a smug bastard, a nervous Alf asked if he realized that he was older than him. In response, Jamie calmly asked him not to go into details and get straight to the point before he did the same to him as he did to his comrades. The situation was heating up and young Mr. Simon began to think about how to get out of this situation. Still, he decided not to make the situation worse. Turning to Jamie, he falsely admitted that he had not come to fight, because he wanted to socialize a little. Moreover, he went further, and even called him incredible for being able to use the silent spell. Despite his attempt to rectify the situation, Jamie replied that he had already listened to enough useless chatter, after which he invited the Earl's son to go his own way. As expected, Alf was simply shocked, and decided to make sure that the impudent person was exactly aware of who he had the honor of talking to. Nevertheless, he decided to come to terms with this refusal, believing that the time for a serious dialogue simply had not come. He asked the son of Earl Welton whether they would maintain contact in the future. In his defense, he asked to understand them correctly, citing the reason why they treated him this way in his rude answer when they met. Alf further stated that since in the future they would become the core of the nobility of the eastern region, it would be nice for them to become friends at that age. Listening to the deceitful speech, Jamie thought that this red-haired guy was some kind of clown, because if he had not shown him the skills, then their company would have tried to make friends by force. The reason for his behavior was clear to him from the very beginning. Alf wanted to subjugate him to himself. Jamie was already annoyed that he allowed himself to listen to something so pathetic, so he decided to answer directly, and refusing the offer of friendship, stated that he did not care about his ideas and all that, after which he once again asked to be left alone. Upon hearing the refusal, Alf lost his temper and shouted that Jamie was a disgusting idiot that was getting on his nerves. After these words, he shouted that he would mercilessly trample to smithereens the frail magic of the self-confident heir of the Welton family. Pointing his magic wand at his opponent, he confidently declared that Jamie would have no choice but to serve him. In response, the heir of the Welton family did not even blink an eye. With a sly smile, he decided that it would be better to put him in his place now than to continue to play further. Turning to his opponent, Jamie said that in fact Alf initially planned to resort to brute force. In response, the vile heir of Count Simon admitted that this was true, after which he clarified that he changed the plan slightly after Weldon used his magic. In the end, he decided that he would act in his usual style. Diablo Wolfer felt some disgust at the duplicity of his opponent at such a young age. He wondered if he really thought adults would let him do whatever he wanted. Jamie was sure that his age would be in trouble if anything happened. With a confident smile, the arrogant Alf replied that there was no need to worry about it. After that, he took out a magic ball and said that no one would see them as long as he had this thing in his possession. Then he used the artifact and a seal appeared under their feet. Looking around, Jamie assumed that the enemy had a magical artifact of illusion in his hands. Alf replied that if Jamie knows what it is, then he really is a magician. Despite this, he was confident in his superiority and shouted that soon the arrogant heir of the Welton family would beg for his mercy. At the same moment, he was surprised that the enemy decided to dispel the silence spell. Young Master Simon's servants were freed from the spell. They started talking about how hard it was to go through something like this, after which they returned to threatening the Welton family member, saying that he was tired of living and would not get away with this. While the angry servants of the young master threatened the heir of the Welton family, he admitted that the son of Count Simon possesses a very good artifact. Jamie called this situation extremely interesting. The self-confident Alf replied that he simply did not realize the situation he was in. Without letting him finish, Jamie cast a spell, calling on his enemies to suffer. His incredible pressure affected the self-confident boys so much that their noses began to bleed, and they could do nothing to ease their torment. With a sly smile, Jamie advised them not to turn off the artifact, because otherwise everyone would see them drowning in hellish torment. With a loud cry, they all fell to their knees while Jamie began to arrogantly laugh at their pathetic behavior. In the end, Alf still stopped using the artifact and remained the only one of the three who did not lose consciousness. His head began to hurt so badly that he could not control his nausea. This state seemed incredibly humiliating to him. His whole body was trembling at the thought that his opponent was a fourth-rank mage, while he was some kind of pathetic second tier. He didn't understand how things could turn out like this. Alf knew in advance that Jamie was born into a family of knights, so he believed that he was significantly superior to him in strength. because he could not come to the ball with a sword. He couldn't understand how someone his age had such magical power if their family specialized exclusively in swordplay. He assumed that this was about an exceptional talent that he himself did not have. Rising from his knees, he was filled with hatred. He loudly declared that he would not forgive his enemy and would not leave it just like that. Consumed by rage, Alf, who believed that he had been defeated by talent, thought that he would do everything to crush his opponent and make sure that Jamie could never use magic again. As soon as the heir of the Simon family returned to the mansion, he again planned something insidious. This time his comrades were not so confident in themselves because it was about stealing a magical instrument. The young master was dissatisfied with their excitement and declared that the servants had no right to ask questions, but should silently and blindly follow the boss. At that moment, they were suddenly startled by the mention of Alpha's name. As it turned out, their younger brother Lennon approached them. The older brother asked why he was here and not at the ball. Lennon replied that this was due to recent events. Extending his hand with magical objects towards his older brother, Lennon said that he could not be calm when Alf was offended by the actions of some fool. Seeing the object in his brother's hands, Alf was alarmed, realizing that it was a very dangerous thing. With a smile on his face, the caring Lennon asked his older brother not to worry about where he got such a thing, after which he advised him to teach the Welton family dropout a lesson. Alf admitted that he was right because he was simply seething with hatred for the heir of another great family. Later that day, Mr. Arjano Welton finally arrived at the ball. Count Simon personally went outside to meet him. For the first time that evening, a sincere smile appeared on the face of the Count Magician of the Red Lotus. Arjano Welton was also glad to see him. He even laughed in surprise that the Count was greeting him in person. As soon as they exchanged pleasantries, the organizer of the ball invited the dear guest to go inside. The ball has already come to an end, and according to the red-haired Count, the event was a success as always. But what he wanted to discuss most during the ball was a meeting with young Mr. Welton. The father was interested to hear the great magician's opinion about his son. First of all, Mr. Simon noticed that the Welton family loves their children very much and admitted that he is very envious of his friend. Arjano assumed that nothing had changed between them. Silence began as Mr. Simon did not want to remember this. However, he returned to the original topic and stated that Jamie not only surprised him, he was completely amazed by this meeting. Arjano was not surprised by this answer. He understood that the Blood Lotus Mage was beating around the bush. In order not to waste time, the Sword Master politely suggested that his comrade considered his son talented. With an interested look, Mr. Simon replied that the word talent would not be enough. He thinks Jamie is the best he's ever seen. The great magician said that perhaps in the history of all mankind, there was no more talented person than the heir of the Welton family. Arjano admitted that Marcus Linmel had the same opinion about his son. With some sadness, he said that he too knew about his talent when he was younger, but never thought of it as anything special. So he asked Marcus for a favor, because if someone is so talented in magic, then he should become a magician, despite the family traditions. With a smile on his face, Mr. Simon admitted that his friend's son would be very lucky to have such a strong teacher as Marcus. When he learned that the great magician refused this request, he treated this information with understanding, after which he declared that Jamie was an unsurpassed genius who would be able to achieve everything on his own, even becoming a legendary magician of the 9th rank. After this, he unexpectedly stated that he was envious that the young man was born more talented than himself, but on the other hand, he was very interested to see how far the high magician could advance with such power. Hearing his comrade's speech, Arjano began to get nervous, realizing that he was heading towards a very dangerous topic. After this, Mr. Simon began to say that although people are weak, they were able to build a great civilization. On the other hand, he understood that compared to dragons, high elves, and other creatures, their magic was insignificant, like a breeze against a hurricane. The great magician believed that only through their unity could they withstand certain threats. Addressing his comrade, he stated that thanks to sword masters like him, they can still fight for life in this world. With an anticipatory smile, he asked his comrade what would happen if a magician of the 9th rank was born. With incredible enthusiasm, he declared that even such masters of magic as dragons would not stand next to him. Despite his comrade's concern about his words, he stated that with all his soul he longed for people to become the true rulers of this world. More modest and worried about the fate of his son, Earl Welton said that Mr. Simon's words were very arrogant. But the red-haired magician replied that even if his words were arrogant, it was not something bad, because they both knew about the forgotten history that was erased from the face of the earth. The story that Count Simon mentioned was a secret that was known only to a few on the entire continent. About 10,000 years ago, history disappeared due to some incident. Because of the extraterrestrial perfect creatures who decided to protect people from those secrets, Count Simon dreams that people will gain such power that it would prevent them from being kept in line. He wanted humanity to gain such power in order to prevent the history of their civilization from repeating itself, as well as the risk of their sudden extinction. After this tense dialogue, they said goodbye and went to rest. The caring father could not approach his son. Looking at him, he wondered whether such expectations towards Jamie would be justified. As a father who has such a talented child, he was very worried. It was hard for him to accept that his sweet and beloved son would one day become a support for all humanity. Argonaut Welton hoped that his son would grow up to be a just man. He was ready to give his all for this goal. In the morning, the event continued, and all the guests returned to the Simon family living room. Jamie was quite thoughtful, worried about the reason for his father's worries, but he wasn't going to use mind control just because he was just interested. In addition, he understood that his abilities were not yet sufficiently developed. His calm was interrupted again by Mrs. Ashe. As soon as she came over to say hello, an already puzzled Jamie asked her not to pester him with her obsessive behavior. In response, the girl slyly said that this time she had an interesting thing to do. After that, he loudly called his sister. Jamie understood that the situation was getting worse, because Ashe suddenly decided to increase the number of annoying interlocutors. To avoid such a pastime, Jamie tactfully stood up from the table and said that he was leaving, since he had no intentions of getting closer to them. In response, the girl shouted that he should at least meet his sister, since their families are so close. After her words, the eldest daughter, Rebecca Vale, came up to them and called her speech rude. She asked her younger sister not to discard formalities in conversation with the Count's son. Seeing her face, the guy froze in place and no longer paid attention to the argument between the two girls. Noticing his reaction, Ashe started laughing and said that he had a crush on her older sister. Diablo Wolfer was devastated. He did not understand how Jane ended up here. He meant the beloved of his life, who was given to the gods for her own good. This is where the story of the great magician of the past begins, who was deprived of his human emotions. At the same moment, the young man who hated the heir of the Welton family most of all rushed towards them. Filled with rage, Alf was about to carry out his revenge. He again armed himself with dangerous artifacts, believing that he was now ready to put an end to his offender. But Jamie did not pay any attention to the heir of the Simon family. He again named the eldest daughter of the Vale family after the love of his life. Hearing this, the girl was confused, because she did not understand who she was talking about. Seeing the look of young Mr. Welton, Ashe said out loud that he had fallen in love. The sneaky alpha decided to take advantage of this moment. He shouted that Jamie would now obey him, and then used the power of a rare magical artifact. Jamie was oblivious to this, while Ashe was frightened by the danger of the spell that was directed in their direction. At the same moment, the frightened Rebecca rushed towards her sister. But a moment later, young Mr. Welton intimidatingly addressed the enemy, asking him not to interfere, after which he dispelled his attack. Alf Simon could not believe his eyes. He knew that the artifact created by his father, the Phoenix Ring, belongs to the 6th rank of fire magic. He was confused, not understanding how the 10-year-old magician was able to repel his attack. Releasing his mana, Jamie said with hatred that it was time to die. He used an ice spell on his opponent. Ice began to spread throughout the body of the heir of the Simon family. The frightened guy began to feel incredible cold and could not resist this force at all. Alf began to scream from the pain he was experiencing. Despite the fact that the enemy was suffering in front of everyone present, Jamie was consumed by his anger and had no intention of interrupting the spell. But at that very moment, the swordmaster approached him and said that this was enough. His father, Mr. Argonaut Welton, came to deal with his rage. He asked his son not to worry and said that everything is fine now. Having looked around, Jamie was convinced that the girl, who was the reincarnation of his beloved from the past, was unharmed. After this, he fell unconscious due to his father's use of magic. This incident took place in front of everyone present, and at the center of the events were the two counts and their children. Mr. Argonaut could not believe that Jamie was actually going to use such a terrifying spell on his peer. Communicating with his friend, at first he thought that he had made a mistake. But seeing the power of the spell and the impossibility of resistance on the part of the heir of the Simon family, he realized that these actions on the part of his son were serious, and if he could not stop him, then Alf could die. At the same time, Mr. Simon was not at all worried about his son, considering the actions of the future magician of the 9th rank to be amazing. He understood that the Alpha's magic was weak and less than half his own, but if the artifact had worked, then everyone present would have been burned alive. This outcome of events did not make him nervous, because he was filled with admiration for the future child, who would be able to fulfill his long-time dream. At the same moment, his wife threw a tantrum over the fact that Jamie almost killed their child, while the Count behaves completely calmly. Her words hurt the feelings of Jamie's mother. She asked the lady to express herself correctly, because the only one who tried to kill was Alf. As an argument, she stated that it was the heir of the Simon family who first attacked their son. In addition, she mentioned that Alf had prepared in advance and used the artifact in his direction. Her words were true and put the lady of the Simon family in an awkward position. With tears in her eyes, she tried to justify herself. Mrs. Sears Welton demanded that she speak to the end. Mr. Argino intervened in their conflict and told his wife that this was enough. Under the gaze of all the visitors, the woman who loved her beloved son tried to find support. Her husband took a few steps forward. She was sure that although he was strict, he would now decisively stand up for his child. But her hopes came to an end as soon as he admitted to all the visitors that their son had behaved rudely on such an important day. Addressing Madam Welton, he offered his sincere apologies. The lady did not expect that the Red Lotus magician would actually take the side of justice. She couldn't come to terms with the fact that she was surprisingly kind and couldn't be angry after such an apology. In response, Mrs. Welton thanked the Count for resolving the dispute and said that she would go to her room. Count Simon took this for granted and suggested that Argino also go and rest. As soon as he resolved the conflict, he apologized for ruining the evening in front of the rest of the guests, after which he asked them to return to their chambers and have a good rest. On such a note, the ball was over. There was silence in the hall, which could only be interrupted by the quiet whispers of those present. Turning to her husband, Mrs. Simon asked in a trembling voice why he did this. With tears in her eyes, she shouted that their son had suffered because of the actions of the heir of the Welton family. The moment she became rude, the Count, with a cold and piercing gaze, ordered her to remain silent. He said that there were a lot of unnecessary ears here, so she and her son should return to their quarters. Despite the madam's pleas, Mr. Simon still approached his son and assumed that he was trying to get his attention. With an angry look, he asked him not to remain silent. While the son trembled in fear of his father, the man asked if he thought that his actions would ruin their reputation in the eyes of the Eastern nobles and the entire kingdom. Raising his eyes, he could not hide his fear. Alf thought that he just wanted his father to notice him. Still, he couldn't find the courage to admit it, so he shouted that Jamie had been rude to him. After his words, in an even more angry and threatening tone, the Count asked where he got the phoenix ring. The son, scared to death, was afraid to give an answer. His father asked him to hurry up, saying that he did not like to repeat things twice. With tears in his eyes, Alf admitted that his younger brother gave him the phoenix ring. Hearing this, the Count called his youngest son. As soon as Lennon walked inside, he realized what was happening. He couldn't believe that his older brother was so pathetic that, despite the conditions created in advance, he still failed. Lennon decided to pretend that he didn't know what was going on, so with a kind smile he asked his father what was the matter. In response, the father directly asked if he was the one who gave Alpha the phoenix ring. The younger brother admitted this, so the Count asked why he gave him something so dangerous. Lennon began to twist the facts, saying that he did not want Jamie to bully his older brother. But just moments later, his father's words made him tremble, because he said that Lennon did not do this for his brother, but simply wanted to manipulate them. Lennon found himself in an awkward position. He did not understand how his father figured out what games he was playing between his peers. Only at that moment did Alf realize that he had become part of his younger brother's cunning plan. Looking at the children, the Count said that the children most likely had already guessed that they were not interesting to him. With a cold look, he asked if they knew why everything was like this. Without waiting for an answer, he said that despite the fact that his blood flows in their veins, they lack talent. On the other hand, he noted that this does not mean that he is not aware of their vile and base thoughts. At that moment, the guys could not squeeze out a word, because they were afraid of their father, who was cold towards them. Addressing the children, Count Simon said that if they were so eager to get his attention, then they should not waste time on such tricks. Instead, he asked them to work to prove themselves worthy of his blood. As he left the hall, he warned them that he would no longer interfere with their plans, so they themselves had to deal with the mess they had created. He explained that Alf and Lennon should ask Jamie Welton for forgiveness when dawn comes. As soon as his father left the room, Alf was alarmed that he would again have to meet the heir of the Welton family, whom he hated so much and considered the cause of his problems. Just the thought of it made him shake, and he admitted it. Having asked his brother whether he was going to carry out his father's orders, he heard nothing in response, and looking at Lennon, thought that his father's words made him feel bad. But as it turned out, his younger brother was delighted with his father's words. He swore to himself that his father would see that he was truly worthy of the royal blood of the Simon family. That evening, an anxious Mrs. Sears could not fall asleep for a long time. She watched her sleeping son, because she could not forget how serious his bloodlust was towards the heir of Count Simon. Mom could not imagine what could have happened to a 9-year-old child for him to get into such a state. The moment she realized that they were not just fooling around, she managed to realize the danger of using such a powerful artifact of fire magic. The woman could not forgive Alf, even after Count Simon's apology. As soon as her son turned over during sleep, she completely forgot about her anxiety. She grabbed her face, not understanding what she was thinking about. At that moment, her husband came to her aid. Mr. Argino asked if she was okay. She didn't know how to answer his question. She understood that her caring husband saw her condition, but she still could not admit her worries about the situation. The man asked what he should do for her to make her feel calmer. With a smile on her face, the lady remembered how he stopped her during the conflict after the incident between the children. Mr. Argino said he was simply worried that doing so would only make her mood worse. Mother mentioned that Count Simon immediately politely apologized, so she didn't want to create conflict among the Eastern nobles over such nonsense. The unrest disappeared, and then they began to laugh all together because the heir of the Simon family got a bad deal for his insolence. After that, they decided to leave so as not to disturb their son's sleep. Of course, Jamie was awake and heard all their conversations. He understood their excitement, because he could not control himself at that moment of the conflict. He didn't really pay any attention to it. The only thing he had thought about since meeting the eldest sister of the Valle family was that his lover from his past life had also been revived at this time. For the great magician, this did not seem too strange, since he himself was reborn after tens of thousands of years. He thought it impossible that it wasn't her, but as it turned out, Jane had no memories from her past life. Still, this was normal, because he is a special case, since his rebirth is an act of his power. However, he did not understand the very fact of her rebirth at the same time as him. He had already begun to think about whether this was just an accident or fate, or whether the 12 gods were involved in this. His doubts were dispelled by his pet. Jamie admitted that it was nonsense to assume the intervention of the gods, because if they found out about his rebirth, he would not have a peaceful life. Playing with the little black one like a toy, he decided not to bother his head with unnecessary thoughts. But still, memories from his past life haunted him. This was due to the fact that he then lost his beloved Jane. Since such an opportunity had arisen, he did not mind meeting her again. Meanwhile, the cult members have already learned that great changes are coming in the world of magic. One of them has already prepared a report for its management. This report was written about the eldest son of the Welton family. He indicated that at the age of 9, he was already a wizard of at least the 4th rank, and most likely, his incredible talent would soon turn the whole world upside down. In the morning, Jamie went to Count Simon's garden. The atmosphere was pleasant because he was away from the noise of the event. At the same time, the little black one was walking with him. As it turned out, he didn't really like spending his time this way. Diablo Wolfer understood that the place was quiet due to the fact that most of the guests had already gone home, since this was the last day of the ball. This was to his advantage because he enjoyed being alone. Before returning home, he thought that he needed to meet his lover from his past life again. But in the midst of this silence, he suddenly felt mana. Its use was accompanied by some sounds. The guy looked around, but did not see the source or user of the power. He decided to use mana and quickly found the user's locations. As soon as he ran to the pond, he saw who had attracted his attention. As it turned out, it was Rebecca Valle. She used her power and communicated with a spirit named Ondine. The spirit and the eldest daughter of the Valle family were surprised when they noticed that someone had decided to distract them. Looking around, she was surprised that the Count had come to her. First of all, she asked if everything was okay with him. After his answer, Jamie awkwardly tried to remember her name. Seeing his strange behavior, the beloved from the past began to laugh sincerely. He reintroduced herself to him as Rebecca Valle, not even worried that the Welton family heir had been rude when he forgot her name. Diablo Wolfer could not take his eyes off her. He remembered the last words of his beloved, who asked not to forget her. He understood that Rebecca, like Jane, was also a summoner of water spirits. He was distracted from deep thoughts by the daughter of the Valle family. She politely asked why he looked so sad. Jamie couldn't admit that they had already met in a past life and were lovers. Rebecca herself began to feel sad, assuming that he had not yet recovered from yesterday's events. She understood that she could help him and made the first attempt. Reborn Jane hugged her past life lover and consoled him with the words that everything would be fine. The feeling of having her nearby seemed like a remnant of feelings from the past. But he didn't mind enjoying this moment a little longer. After a little conversation, they sat down by the pond and began to laugh. With a sincere smile, Rebecca mentioned that her father taught her that difficulties are easier to overcome if you share them with someone. Jamie immediately realized that he was talking about Viscount Valle. The girl happily replied that he was right. After that, he admitted that he was glad to have the opportunity to talk normally. Jamie replied that the same thought had occurred to him. Although he was pleased with the girl's sweet smile, he thought that she was a completely different person. During the conversation, he mentioned that he had heard that the Valle family had a tradition of making a contract with the spirits of the air. Rebecca agreed, but as it turned out, due to her strong connection with the spirits, they themselves came to her. but she immediately refused to enter into a contract, and then left. However, on another day, Ondine appeared to her and said that it was her destiny to conclude a contract with her. With an awkward laugh, she admitted that it was an important decision and she should have discussed it with her father, but she accidentally made a contract with the water spirit the first time he appeared. Everything fell into place, because Diablo Wolfer understood that the King of Spirits knew for sure about her rebirth. The contract with the Spirit King is different from any other. It can be called a soul contract that binds lives. The moment Jane's soul was reborn in Rebecca's body, the Spirit King immediately realized it. Jamie politely asked if her father punished her for this. Rebecca replied that Viscount Vale was not angry, but he looked upset, as did she. Looking into his lover's eyes, Jamie said that this was something special. He surprised the girl by saying that he had never heard of an elemental coming to someone on his own and offering a contract. Jamie said that although she could not make a contract with the spirit of the air, she was chosen by the water elemental, so she should believe in herself. The girl was surprised by his unexpected caring words. With a sweet smile, she thanked him for this. After this pleasant conversation, Jamie thanked her for the day and said that he had to go. As soon as he said goodbye, he immediately ran away without waiting for her answer. The girl thought sadly that she would like to talk more. She became embarrassed, not understanding what kind of feelings she was experiencing at the moment of being next to him. On the way back, Jamie laughed at how awkward he was acting, but believed that such a formal speech had the place to be, since Rebecca seemed more mature than the other children at the event. Then he calmly returned to the mansion. As soon as he returned, he heard awkward addresses in his direction from his peers. These were the heirs of the Simon family who came to meet him at the request of his father. Jamie asked what they wanted from him. His peer Alf felt awkward, but still gathered his resolve and shouted an apology. The heir of the Welton family was surprised and asked why he suddenly decided to change his mind about the situation. After that, he suggested with a sly smile that the Count had forced him to go and apologize. Alf was confused by Jamie's reaction. Still, Jamie understood him. But on the other hand, he didn't know what another son of the family, Simon, was doing here. He asked Lennon why they came together, believing that Alf was afraid to come and apologize himself. The youngest son admitted that he was the one who gave his brother the magical artifact. Now everything has fallen into place. Jamie directly said that in this case, the brothers wanted to get rid of him by combining their forces. After that, he asked his younger brother what his name was. Without feeling any awkwardness from the words of his peer, Lennon introduced himself with a sly and self-confident smile on his face. Jamie felt that he was not so simple, so he decided to test his abilities with the help of mana. Looking at the self-confident and even arrogant air of the great magician, he noticed that he was not only cunning, but also quite talented and could not be compared with the second son of the Simon family. Alf was surprised that his hated enemy was so interested in his little brother. In fact, Jamie was surprised that even such a talented son was not enough for Count Simon. Lennon still acted cunningly. He noticed that it was good that nothing terrible had happened, after which he said that since the heir of the Welton family had heard their apologies, they could be free. At that moment, the Welton family's young master's interest only intensified, realizing that this guy was taking him for an idiot. On the day of the incident, Lennon did not even appear among those present, although he was the real instigator of their conflict. Diablo Wolfer suggested that for this young manipulator, there are no interesting and important people except his father. He understood that if he let him go just like that, he would continue to put a spoke in his wheels. To warm up these guys a little, he decided to infuriate his eldest son, and asked whether it would be difficult for him in the fight for the inheritance. At the same moment, he asked his youngest son if he was right. Just as Lennon decided to walk away from the conversation, Jamie appeared in front of him, and putting his hand on his shoulder, threateningly said that since the whole conflict was his doing, then he must be punished. After that, he began to use one of his terrifying peer spells. Lennon freaked out and asked what Jamie was doing. But after a moment, he felt that there was no one else next to him. It was dark around him. He felt very cold, and the trembling in his body began to cause him serious anxiety. After that, he saw a terrifying aura of piercing gaze that said that this was his last chance. Scared to death, Lennon fell to his knees. He didn't even notice how tears began to flow from his eyes. Despite his self-confidence, it was only at that moment that he realized that he had fallen under the influence of a strong illusion. He didn't know what it was, but he couldn't shake that feeling of horror. The cunning manipulator had never encountered anything so dangerous. His body was trembling with fear and he could barely stay conscious. With a satisfied smile, Jamie waited for the answer of his impudent peer. Looking at him, Lennon realized that he knew for sure that this was his last chance. Bowing his head to the heir of the Welton family, he apologized for his behavior. The time has come to say goodbye. The carts of the great families arrived at the main entrance to the mansion. Jamie was really glad that he was finally going home. In fact, he was already tired of such trips out of town, and began to think that it was better to be squeezed by his mother and stay at home. As soon as he thought about this, he began to laugh because he became too emotional and loving after his rebirth. At that moment, the Count approached him, and noted that he was glad to see the heir of the Welton family in a good mood. Although Mr. Simon promised to talk to Jamie, he did not have the right time for this dialogue. Young Mr. Welton replied with a smile that he was simply glad to be returning home soon. The Count admitted that he was sorry that he never had the chance to communicate with a very promising magician. Polite Jamie replied that he also hoped for this, so he shared his interlocutor's feelings. Hearing his agreement, the Red Lotus magician invited him to stay, but Jamie politely refused, saying that his desire to go home was stronger since he was completely exhausted. After this, he suddenly took the experienced Count by surprise by saying that the reason for his fatigue was known to both of them. Sighing, the Count laughed politely and agreed with the words of the talented young man. After this, he said that Jamie should be careful, because after this event, the world of magic began to watch him. In response, the guy said that this was expected for him. The Count was surprised, and with a sincere smile came to the conclusion that Jamie already knew who he was. In response, Jamie said that he really knows his worth. Walking near the mansion, he remembered the gentleman's youngest son, and said that he was forced to teach him a lesson. Count Simon thought so, saying that Lennon had not been himself for the second day. Showing some confusion, Jamie asked in surprise whether Mr. Simon was angry because of the situation. The magician replied that he saw no reason to be evil, because these were the consequences of their decisions. Seeing his reaction, Jamie finally understood what those two brothers were missing and why they had become so cocky and rude. To influence the situation a little, he mentioned that Lennon was quite talented and should be trained. The Count assured him that he knew more about his youngest son's abilities than anyone else. He said Lennon was worthless. To dispel his self-confidence a little, Jamie continued to press, and said that it was worth a try, because if Lennon tried, he could reach the level of his father. But he had no chance to show his talent now, because he was under so much pressure. After that, the heir of the Welton family allowed himself to rudely point his finger at Count Simon and say directly that it was his fault, because it was precisely because he could not see the talents of the children that they became such bullies. Jamie thought Alf was quite ordinary, but Lennon seemed promising to him. Hearing this, the master felt awkward and began to admit that he had underestimated his own son. He could not believe that the talent that he, an 8th-level magician, could not notice in his son, was able to be discovered by a child. Count Simon, being one of the most powerful magicians of our time, felt as if standing in front of him was not a child, but a great magician. He was in complete shock, and wanted to know how Jamie came to such conclusions. But the guy did not have time to hear his words. His mother, Sears, approached him and asked him to hurry as they were already leaving. Hearing this, Jamie politely said goodbye and finally asked not to attach importance to the words of the stupid child. In just a few minutes of communication, he was able to create an incredible impression. The bright shine of the young magician's incredible talent haunted Count Simon. Still, the meeting met his expectations. From the very beginning, he thought that after communicating with this talented person, only a feeling of devastation would await him. As soon as Jamie arrived home, he went to meet his servants on the first night. The meeting place was appointed in the forest, and the little black one immediately sensed where his master's charges were. Jamie asked the servants to hurry up in a dissatisfied tone. Immediately after his words, Rise and Azard appeared from the bushes in new noble costumes. They apologized for showing up a little later than their master wished. In response, Jamie asked to get to the point and tell him everything they had learned. To begin with, Rise reported that the Zenith Church has been doing useful work within the lands of Heis for some time without compensation. They provide food and shelter to those in need, and recently opened their own orphanage, which has created a good impression of themselves. As it turned out, they began to act immediately after the destruction of the criminal organization Laval. They came to the poor, served them, and preached the will of God. At first, civilians did not attach any importance to this. However, after the church's continued activity, people began to depend on it, soon becoming believers. As a result, the position of the Zenith Church in Chis rose to incredible heights. The news that people worshipped the Zenith Church as the most generous and respected in Hies made the young master angry. There was a reason for his feelings. He knew that that deity would never do charity for nothing. After this, he decided to direct his resentment towards the servants and asked if they believed that war and peace could coexist. The guys looked around in confusion and hesitantly answered that no. In turn, the more erudite Rise said that he believes that war and peace are connected. Jamie agreed with his words and said that this is the whole Zenith, because the world under his rule is time, the price of which is countless victims, and war is a true manifestation of his divinity. After this, He declared that everything that the priests of Zenith were doing was contrary to his will and aroused suspicion. He was sure that something was hidden under this nobility, so he gave the order to find out what was the reason for their actions. He was right, because more and more children devoted to their faith appeared in the Zenith Church orphanage. Addressing one of God's servants, Ricky said with admiration and joy that compared to begging and constant beatings, "This is paradise." He could be understood because what he saw was just a beautiful picture. A month and a half had passed since they arrived at the shelter, and Ricky was truly happy. He believed that if it weren't for the shelter, his and his sister's lives would have been doomed. They finally have a comfortable place to live. Sister Anna always greeted him with a smile on her face. Unfortunately, she is blind. Knowing this fact, their parents simply abandoned them and ran away. To protect his sister, Ricky did a lot of evil. Living on the street is hard, and even the adults were indifferent to their misfortune. It was a hopeless life with no one to help you. After all the terrible events, the Zenith Church was the first to lend them a helping hand. The child's life suddenly changed. Perceiving this false mercy as a second chance, he wanted to share his happiness with others, and for this, he was going to become a priest of God to spread the so-called miracle. The children were encouraged by various news, for example. The news that their peer, Shino, had received a divine blessing became a motivation to demonstrate even more loyalty to their religion. Having received divine blessing, the child will be able to become a priest after training in the main church. After talking with his subordinates, Jamie looked around the city and was about to return to the mansion. But at the same moment, the little black one began to point out something strange to him. Listening to his opinion, Jamie looked around again and noticed something strange. Some knight in a long cloak was lying unconscious on the sidewalk, which looked very strange. As soon as Jamie came closer to him, he felt that he had a very strange energy. He understood that we were talking about vile divine power, so he assumed that this was a priest. But when he saw his weapon, he realized that this was a high-ranking church minister. The fact that the holy knight was lying on the road like that still seemed strange. It sounded like a problem brewing. With his foot on the vile servant's head, Jamie thought that this was an opportune moment to get rid of him. At the same moment, the attendant suddenly grabbed his other leg. The attendant took him by surprise, and Jamie was afraid. It seemed that this man did not understand what was happening at all. He tried to say something but could not finish his speech. It was clear that this guy was exhausted to the limit. In the end, he managed to shout that he was damn hungry, after which he lost consciousness again. Jamie was indeed frightened at first by his behavior, but since the attendant posed no danger to him, he decided to leave him lying there. As she left, she hoped that she would never again encounter this strange knight with vile divine power. But as it turned out, the world is a very small place, and the very next morning they were destined to meet. The knight, so disgusting to him, joined their family breakfast. The stranger said with a kind laugh that if it weren't for the Count's help, he would have died of hunger on the sidewalk slabs. Mr. Arjano replied that it was the merit of the guards that led him to the mansion. Despite his words, the Knight of Ras continued to thank the Count, saying that he had excellent soldiers. As it turns out, this man is a Knight of Light. Jamie felt incredible discomfort from the presence of such a person at their family table. Moreover, he did not understand the reason why Mom and Dad treated the stranger so well. The knight then said that he serves the Church of Pyro, the goddess of mercy and punishment. As it turned out, when Mrs. Welton learned about this, she was very surprised. Turning to the knight, she asked if he had ever heard of Bishop Saphira. The knight was surprised and assumed that the lady was from Afton. He was shocked when he found out that she came from Belle's family. As soon as he heard this, he suddenly rose from the table. After this, he bowed low before the lady, expressing his greetings. The situation became even more confusing in Jamie's eyes. He knew that Perro's church was located in Afton, on the territory where Belle's family was located, but he knew that this should not be the reason for his prostration. Anyone in front of whom a knight would behave this way must be of at least the rank of a bishop, so he turned to his father for an answer. Diablo Wolfer was forced to take advantage of the privileges of his age, and, with a sweet expression on his face, asked why their guest was greeting his mother in such a manner. The father replied that it was a long story, after which he said that perhaps he would tell about it another time. Jamie couldn't believe that his clever trick didn't work, and he had to suffer some humiliation because of it. He thought that if the Bell family really had such close ties to the Pyro Church, then this could become an inconvenient problem, since the patroness of those religious fanatics was the one he would have to kill one day. After breakfast, Mr. Arjano decided to talk with the knight alone, and first of all asked how he ended up in his lands. This seemed strange, since the Pyro Church does not conduct business in the eastern region of the kingdom. Without waiting for an answer, the sword master assumed that the knight was here to expand their influence. Sir Raz became agitated by his words and began to object, saying that he had in no way planned to do such a thing, but was only here because he had been pursuing someone for a long time. After being asked who his target was, the man hesitantly answered that he was the one who was conducting unthinkable and cruel experiments that no one should conduct. He was referring to the mysterious creator of the chimeras. Hearing the mention of such a master, Mr. Welton was confused and felt anger that such a person was on their lands. After an awkward pause, the knight apologized, saying that the rest of the information was so secret that even within the church not everyone knew about it. Despite the fact that he could not tell anyone about this, he still decided to share the information with the Count if he listened to his request, and they concluded a contract. Thus, he asked the swordmaster for help, hoping that this would greatly help their cause. Mr. Arjano had not heard of the existence of such spellcasters for a long time. It is known that the outer body of chimeras is created from various creatures, but their creators are treated worse than ordinary criminals because the basis of the chimera is a person. Perhaps there were those who did not use people to create them, but history knew no such precedents. In response, Mr. Argano could not promise his full support, but stated that since he was aware of the relative's relationship with the Pero Church, he could not turn a blind eye to this incident. Hearing his speech, joy and blush appeared on the young knight's face. Nevertheless, Mr. Welton directly stated that he would help his unexpected guest. Hearing his words, the knight exploded with joy, but the Count asked him to leave pleasantries and asked why the church was pursuing the creators of chimeras alone and did not ask for help from the kingdom. After this question, he began to feel awkward. The fair-haired Raz admitted that the kingdom would help them, but they did not resort to their help, since in this case the authority of the church would be greatly undermined. Moreover, this matter was personal, because the creator of the chimeras, who was being persecuted by their church, had kidnapped more than 10 of the goddess's knights. Based on this, the swordmaster came to the conclusion that chimeras were created that used divine powers. Meanwhile, Jamie went out into the courtyard of their mansion. Although he was tired of family relationships, this time he couldn't wait for another tea party. Sears and Sarah were already waiting for him here. They asked him to hurry up. The attentive and caring mother immediately noticed her son's dissatisfaction. She asked what he wanted to know so badly. As expected, Jamie wanted to hear more about the mysterious knight and why he was bowing to her. It seemed extremely suspicious to him that the Knight of Light was solemnly greeting a man whom he had never seen before. With a sweet smile on her face, Mom said that the reason for his behavior was because his family had some connection with the Pyro Church. As it turns out, his mother's grandfather, whom he has never seen, is the savior of the Pyro Church. Hearing this, Jamie was unpleasantly surprised that his relative was the one who supported his enemies. According to her mother, in the past, when a very important thing that they kept was stolen from the Pyro Church, her grandfather helped them. She was talking about an incident known as the Portsmouth Garden Incident. This was an incident in which the Demon King's followers used a sacred relic but were unable to summon their lord. The great-grandfather of a talented magician died trying to stop the summoning of the Demon King, after which the Pyro Church granted their family the title of Archbishop and vowed that for the next 100 years the head of the family would be equivalent to the rank of bishop. After hearing the story, Jamie understood why his mother looked sad during the meeting with the knight. Furthermore, he believed that it was stupid of Pyro to make such a reward, but it was all they could do in hopes of thanking the savior for returning their only relic. Diablo Wolfer believed that these circumstances would have a good impact on his future plans, so he planned to take full advantage of these occultists in order to get rid of their patron. At one point, the malicious smile on Jamie's face disappeared because his mother suddenly turned to him. The beloved son regained his childish behavior to the delight of his mother. Having learned interesting information, Jamie carefreely continued drinking tea. Meanwhile, the youngest brother of the Genus Church, Shino, was chosen as the new priest. The current priests blessed his upcoming journey and raised their glasses, calling this a significant day. The guy was filled with joy, believing that he would soon become the same savior as those who gave him a second chance at life. As he said goodbye, many friends gathered around him and could not hold back their tears of joy. Before leaving for Mount Chongbon, he said goodbye to his comrades. The decision to go was sudden, so he didn't even expect that the guys would come to say goodbye to him. Happy for his friend, Ricky said with a sincere smile that the priests were going to send him too, but a little later, so he asked his friend not to be sad from loneliness. Clenching his fist, Shino promised with a blush on his face that he would wait for his comrades to arrive. After these words, his carriage set off. Ricky was sincerely happy for his comrade and promised himself that one day he would also become a priest. Although we were talking about Mount Chongbon, the road to it, to the surprise of the young man, did not take much time. A few hours later, they suddenly stopped and the priest asked him to hurry up. Looking outside, the guy realized that it didn't quite look like the place in question. Approaching some ominous building, He thought that the cart could not cover such a distance in such a short time. Shino hesitantly asked the priest if this was really the main branch of the Pyro Church. The man with a strange smile did not answer his question, but only asked to follow him. Looking around, the guy apologized and expressed the opinion that they were in the wrong place, but the priest asked him not to worry and trust the church. After that, he pushed the guy inside. As soon as they entered the ominous building with dim lighting, the priest asked him to go downstairs. Continuing to descend into some deep and cold basement, Shino tried to convey to the priest that this did not look like the place he had been told about. As he talked about how this place seemed strange and not quite what he had imagined, large doors appeared in front of him, leading to a mysterious room. Looking inside, he saw something terrible. In an uncertain voice, he whispered to the priest that he saw something strange. But the priest did not pay attention to his words, after which he saw another church minister in front of him, and addressing him as a bishop, said that he had brought the child he was talking about. The boy was shocked when he saw the bishop in such a place. With tears in his eyes, he turned to him in fear, saying that he was here because he had been chosen by God. But at the same time, he expressed that this place was strange. With a trembling voice, he admitted that he had seen some kind of monster. With a hypocritical, lying smile, Bishop Lincoln replied that Shino was indeed the chosen one. Hearing his words, the guy with tears in his eyes asked why he was then in such a terrible place, and not on Mount Chongban. In a terrifying voice, the bishop said that this is the place where they achieved utopia. After that, he gloatingly said that he was eager to know what such a pure and innocent child like Shino would turn into. After that, Lincoln led the frightened child inside one of the rooms. A terrible man, with a face reminiscent of some kind of monster, appeared in front of him. He said that this time he came across a truly worthy experimental object. Extending his hand towards the trembling guy's head, he declared that he would become a beautiful chimera. The next morning, the young master was forced to go to the largest street of Haisa with the Knight of Light, whom he could not tolerate. The reason he had to show this man around the city was quite simple. During morning tea, his father unexpectedly said that Jamie would show the city to their dear guest. He was not even asked if he wanted it, but as expected, due to his politeness, he did not have the opportunity to refuse. While the guy felt incredible discomfort, believing that he was cursed with bad luck, the attentive Knight of Light wondered where the 9-year-old boy had so much endurance and such a developed memory. Feeling some tension in their walk, he decided to turn to the young master. With a sincere smile on his face, he thanked him for the opportunity to look around his father's lands. Still polite, Jamie replied that he hadn't actually left the house for a long time, so he didn't mind taking a walk, especially one with such benefit. Extending his hand to the young man, the knight suggested returning to the mansion, but Jamie refused the offer to go arm in arm and instead asked if he could ask him one question. Sir Raz was confused, because he thought that the young master should be treated like a child of his age. Feeling awkward, he said he welcomes any questions. After these words, Jamie looked into his eyes and asked what he and his father were talking about. The knight was shocked by such a sudden question. He expected that the child asked him something regarding his service. To avoid this question, he said that they were discussing the talent of the young heir of the Welton family and how handsome he would grow up to be. In response, Jamie showed his displeasure and directly asked him not to lie. The pressure from the young man turned out to be surprisingly great. The knight figured that guys of that age liked to hear something like that, so he began to justify himself that he was telling the truth. Realizing that there would be no constructive conversation, Jamie angrily stated that even children would not believe such nonsense. Feeling awkward, the Knight of Light apologized for the lie and said that he could not tell him what he and the Count were talking about, because this dialogue concerned only adults. Although he didn't say anything for sure, Jamie was now able to make sure that something was definitely going on in Haze, and most likely, this was the reason why he was asked to show the city. While the knight tried to appease the heir of the Welton family, he tried to understand what other clues there might be. At a moment when the knight felt incredible devastation due to the fact that he had offended the son of the great count, Jamie suddenly said that he had forgotten to show another interesting place in this city. The Knight of Light thoughtfully asked what was going on. With a smile on his face, Jamie said that they should visit the Janissa Church of Hazeland. After some time, they arrived at their destination, but the white-haired master did not stop pestering Jamie with questions about whether he was angry with him. At this place they had to stumble upon Ricky, who, as usual, was cleaning the church grounds. Of course, he couldn't help but recognize the guy he ran into on the street late at night. Jamie was exhausted by the energy of the Knight of Light, who continued to be surprised by everything around him and act too loudly. At that moment, another problem appeared. Pointing his finger at Jamie, Ricky shouted that he was the black-haired boy they saw one night. The knight noticed the boy and asked the young gentleman if they were friends. Jamie definitely didn't expect to meet in such a place the guy he had met by chance once in his life. Changing his hair color did not help him avoid unnecessary attention. He did not want to add problems to himself, so he did not even look in his direction and said that he was seeing him for the first time. Riki shouted with displeasure that the black-haired guy was behaving extremely unfriendly. After these words, he ran towards him and with a kind smile and a friendly tone said that he barely recognized his comrade after he dyed his hair. As soon as he ran out onto the road, he heard a cart rushing towards him. The man who was driving it began to panic and shouted at the boy to immediately run off the road. It was already late, and the guys understood that if they didn't do anything, something bad would happen. The horse cart was moments before the collision with the young man. Fearing the child's death, Sir Ras desperately rushed to his aid. Riki, with tears in his eyes and trembling in his body, froze in front of the horses that were a moment before the collision. It was obvious that the child could not be saved, so the great magician decided to intervene. He used a chain-field spell to stop the cart. The knight managed to grab the guy, hoping to soften the blow with his own body, but after a moment he saw that they were saved. The carriage was stopped using the magic of chains. Riki couldn't believe he survived. As soon as he recovered from the state of shock, he rushed towards his savior and squeezed him even harder than his mother did. While Jamie tried to calm him down, the Knight of Raz was deep in thought. He couldn't believe that the magic Jamie used to save the child was so much stronger than any other he had ever seen. He couldn't believe that such a powerful magician was only 9 years old. It seemed obvious that within 10 years, Jamie would be so powerful that the knight would not be able to look him in the eye. The young master's sudden address took him by surprise. Jamie asked the confused knight to calm down and move on to the church. Unfortunately for the young master, Riki was also heading towards the Genus Church and said that he knew it as his home. With a smile on his face, he said that this is a shelter where children live, who, like him, have nowhere to live. As soon as they arrived at the building, they were greeted by a high-status sister of the church. She asked where their student had been, and then asked who he came with. Moving closer to her, Riki emotionally spoke about how they saved him from imminent death. With her hands folded in front of her, the woman thanked the saviors for the fact that Riki had escaped his terrible fate. In response, the knight stated that this was nothing, because this was what any servant of Pyro should have done. Hearing this, the woman became wary. Moreover, the talkative Knight of Light involved the young master in all this, saying that he made a much greater contribution. When the woman asked who he was, the knight replied that he was the son of the ruler of these lands. Jamie was forced to introduce himself to her, forgetting about trying to hide his identity. In response, the woman, in a slightly confused voice, admitted that she was so shocked by what had happened that she did not immediately guess who she was dealing with, even though she saw his emerald hair. Jamie was wary of her reaction, knowing that those born in Haze would immediately recognize his family by the color of their hair. In addition, she was noticeably agitated, which indicated that they were trying to hide something from the rulers of these lands. The woman further suggested that the guys decided to simply take Riki to the shelter, but the Knight of Light replied that he came because he heard that the Church of Genus showed up here only this year, so he wanted to see how their affairs were. The sister invited the representative of the Pyro Church to follow her, after which she asked Riki to give a tour for the young master. Jamie immediately noticed her attempt to separate them. He began to suspect that Raz would be in danger if left without his support. To make the knight a little safer, before splitting up, he asked him not to forget that he had dinner with his parents that evening. Hearing this, Ras was a little confused. It is not clear whether he understood the young master's plan, but with a kind smile he thanked him for the reminder. With a slightly confused tone, Riki hesitantly showed where the shelter and the cafeteria were. Still, he didn't know how he should interact with Jamie after hearing about his noble status. Considering his behavior ridiculous, Jamie angrily asked him to drop the formalities. Riki was surprised by the young master's words, so Jamie was forced to repeat that he did not care about formalities and that you could communicate with him the same way as before. The child from the orphanage was so happy that he began to infuriate the great magician. With a sincere smile, Happy Riki offered to inspect everything that makes the Genus Church proud. Having shown most of the boring places, he offered to come visit him. Opening the doors, Riki told his sister that he had brought a friend with him. Jamie once again felt tense at being called a friend by those he didn't consider to be one. The blind girl was surprised by her brother's words and walked towards the door with a sweet smile. As soon as Jamie saw her, he was simply shocked. Calling Jamie an amazing person, Riki introduced his sister Anna. At the same moment, he noticed some strange reaction from his friend to his sister. As it turned out, Diablo was shocked that the girl had a holy essence, especially that her eyes were filled with holy power. The magician, who hated the gods, understood that she was the representative of God on Earth. Therefore, her power was greater than that of any other person. At birth, one of the body parts of God's representatives possesses a huge accumulation of holy power. Most likely, Anna became blind due to powerful holy power. But the moment she awakens, all the true flows of this world will open to her divine eyes, and, with a high probability, in the future, she will cause the enemy of the gods many problems. Diablo Wolfer thought about getting rid of her, but he knew that if he could recognize her essence, then the high-ranking priest should also know about it. Based on this, he decided not to rush, because getting rid of her now is much more dangerous than later. The young master's silent and mysterious behavior made Ricky assume that he had fallen in love with his little sister. Hearing this, Anna decided to intervene and teach her ill-mannered brother a little lesson. Hitting him on the head with a book, she asked for help with reading the part. Having received a good hit in the back of the head, Ricky agreed to help her with the reading. The guys sat down on the bed, and Jamie continued to look at them while standing, thinking about whose holy power Anna possessed. He understood that it would be better to keep an eye on them, because if someone took advantage of their talents, it would lead to trouble. Still, he had nothing to do here, so he decided to leave. Ricky was surprised that Jamie was in a hurry. He was happy that he had a real friend, so he decided to accompany him to the exit. On the way out, he continued to press the young master with his sincerity and sociability, asking if Jamie would visit them again. At one point, the heir of the Welton family asked why Ricky returned to this place every time. The Geno's church servant thought it was a friendly interest, which made the young master even more nervous. Ricky admitted that at first he was content with being close to his sister, but after he got to this place, he changed his mind. With a smile on his face, he declared that he wanted to be chosen by Mr. Guinness and become his priest. Then the guy remembered that yesterday, one of his shelter friends was elected to the priesthood and went to Mount Chongban. All the children were sincerely jealous of that lucky guy. As soon as Jamie heard about this, he began to feel a connection. The connection between all the events of recent times. We are talking about the sudden appearance of the church on their lands, as well as the fact that local criminals suddenly stepped over the line of what was permitted and began to engage in human trafficking. Jamie felt like he was close to the answers, so he nervously asked where Ricky had been before he came to this orphanage. When Ricky answered hesitantly that he was on the street, Jamie asked him to remember life even earlier. After this question, the young man was forced to admit that he used to be a member of the Six in the criminal organization Laval. After these words, the young master's assumptions created a complete picture, and he smugly thought that he was a real genius. Having examined the Church of Genos, the Knight of Ras thanked his sister for the excursion and pleasant pastime. Next, the woman offered to take him to the young master. The knight himself noticed that she was too silent, so he suggested that the locals did not trust the priests of other churches, and even suspected that this might be connected with the Chimera. The guys met again. Ricky boasted that he showed the shelter to their dear guest. At one point, unexpected people joined their dialogue. It was the Archbishop, accompanied by a strange knight. The man was surprised that such an important guest had come to them in his absence. After greeting Ricky, he turned to the young master and said with a smile that it was an honor to have him in their church. Jamie introduced himself to the bishop, thinking that now everything fits, and most likely it was they who kidnapped the children, using the services of a criminal organization. Then Raz Armatic introduced himself. He did not forget to mention that he is a minister of the Pyro Church. Jamie wondered why the bishop appeared before them at such a moment, and assumed that this was due to the unexpected visit of the Knight of Light. After Ras Armatic introduced himself, Lincoln pitifully said that it was a shame for him that he was absent during the visit of the representative of the Church of Pero. Ignoring Genos' servant's deceitful words, Jamie felt a strange energy emanating from the knight standing behind the bishop. Based on the level of divine power, he guessed that this was a paladin. But what was stranger was how the Knight of the Races reacted to his presence. Analyzing the tense situation, the young master realized that something was wrong with that paladin. Walking back, Raz was lost in thought. To whet his interest a little in actions regarding the Church of Genos, Jamie shared Ricky's words that his friend was chosen by God, and then sent to the main church to become a priest. Hearing this, Ras was shocked, but decided not to show it. In response, he said that Ricky is a good guy and will certainly be able to achieve success, like his comrade. After his fake reaction, Jamie realized that the slight hint wasn't enough. He decided to act more cunningly and asked if the knight had heard anything interesting from his father lately. Since Raz did not understand what they were talking about, Jamie decided to give him ideas, saying that 2 months ago their guards destroyed the Livel gang, which kidnapped and sold children. Then Jamie remembered that before the shelter, Ricky was also a member of that organization. The young master was glad to observe the knight's reaction to his words, hoping that he was already close to understanding the situation. By manipulating the knight's understanding of the situation, Jamie added the key fact that the Genus Church spends a lot on charity. After these words, Ras Medic clenched his fist angrily as he remembered the fact that the Genus Church had never engaged in charity. Now it became clear to him that the orphanage was just a cover for using children as material for creating chimeras. As soon as the knight returned to the Welton family mansion, he met with the Count and shared his observations. In response, Mr. Welton said that according to reports, the Genus Church is having a positive impact on his lands. After this, Ras Medic mentioned a meeting with the bishop, next to whom stood a strange paladin. He said that he felt powerful divine power from him, but at the same time it was impossible to determine whether this paladin served Genus. Moreover, he shared his opinion that that divine power was mixed with something else. After these words, Mr. Welton realized that most likely we were talking about a chimera, which consists of various types of magical energy. Realizing the danger of the situation, Welton exploded from his seat and declared that in this case, he would immediately send his knights to the Church of Genos. In response, Ras Medic said that first they need to make sure that their guesses are true. He promised that he would find proof of this. Mr. Welton did not want to let him go alone, but the knight asked him not to worry, saying that he was ready for danger. After this, the swordmaster asked to clarify what the chance of success was. Ras Medic responded that he felt he had the advantage in this situation. In order not to expose the guest to unnecessary risk, Mr. Welton called 3 fighters and said that they would help him in the battle. Looking around, Raz was surprised, because he had not even felt their presence until the moment they appeared. He immediately noticed that although they wield bastard swords, judging by their appearance and stealth, they are definitely assassins. The Count explained that these are knights who protect the Welton family from the shadows. He called them professionals who would be useful in completing the task. The Knight of Light thanked him for his help and promised that he would definitely reveal the true intentions of the Church of Janus. Using his pet, Jamie overheard their conversation and learned of a chimera with divine powers. He thought that using children as raw materials to create such monsters is quite evil. Still, he was not surprised, realizing that the gods, just as they were vile creatures, remained so. Analyzing the actions of the cult members, he came to the conclusion that they were far from ideally prepared, which meant that they were in a hurry for some reason. Based on this, he decided to change his plans a little. With the help of his pet, the magician sent a message to his servants who were nearby. He himself was already starting to get ready to join the battles and become a real headache for Janus, whom he hated greatly. Realizing that the coming battles would require the highest level of magic, Diablo Wolfer used a subconscious technique that pre-prepares complex spells for later use. Meanwhile, his charges were in the building opposite the church. Hazard was dying of boredom. He did not see any suspicious knights, and because of this, he could not wait to cancel his master's order. In response to his whining, Rise asked them to be grateful for life and do as they were told. Hazard agreed with him and continued to sway in his chair. Their peace suddenly came to an end. Rise heard footsteps behind him. It was a paladin filled with the lust to kill. Within a moment, his blow was aimed at Hazard. He managed to dodge, but was simply shocked by the incredible divine power of his opponent. Despite the unsuccessful attack, the paladin was not going to stop. Having an immeasurable desire to kill, he went on a rampage. Addressing his comrade, Rise asked him to notify the master about the incident as quickly as possible. They understood that they had no chance of winning, so Azard ran towards the exit. But at the same moment, an enemy blow was directed at him. Azard was careless. Seeing the sword approaching, he realized that it was too late to dodge. At the last moment, Rise rushed to his aid. He pushed his comrade towards the window and asked him to hurry up. Hazard fell out of the building and screamed the name of his comrade as he flew down. Rise was wounded in the stomach by an opponent's blow. Within a moment, the entire building was surrounded by a protective barrier called the Dark Dimension. The gentleman came to the rescue in time. Looking at his faithful subordinate, he said his name. Addressing the knight, Jamie stated that now no one would know what was happening, because he used a fairly strong barrier spell. Still, he was a little unhappy that he could not come earlier. It took him a long time to figure out how to use the subconscious even with the help of his pet. Yet 6th rank magic is still too heavy for a child's body. The paladin was not at all concerned about the appearance of a strong enemy. He single-mindedly rushed into the attack, filled with a lust for killing. Jamie didn't even flinch. He confidently resorted to using gravity, 5th rank magic. This power increased the gravitational force in the opponent's area and suppressed the target to the point where the paladin was unable to move and fell to the ground. Next, he used Death Grip on the prone opponent, magic that summons the dead to hold the target. The next step was an equally powerful sacrifice spell that sacrifices the summoned souls, creating a huge explosion. The paladin immediately sensed incredible danger. After using the power of the 5th rank, Jamie was surprised that he could not achieve the result quickly. The knight was badly wounded, but was still able to rise to his feet. At that moment, Jamie logically assumed that his opponent was at the expert level. The paladin rushed to the attack again, wanting to destroy all the lives around. Demonstrating his fortitude, he surprised the young magician, but Jamie didn't even move. Turning to the enemy, he used another spell and told him that, unfortunately, he had chosen an opponent that was not up to his level. It was a puppet spell, magic that threaded threads through the soul of a target into submission. The paladin was stopped moments before striking. Unable to resist and remove the restraints, he fell to the ground. In addition, his condition did not make it possible to clearly analyze the danger. Having immobilized the enemy, the great magician of the past began to slowly walk towards him. Approaching him, a wild-eyed Jamie decided to satisfy his enemy's interest and reported that fragments of the dead had entered his body, creating an explosion. The paladin continued to try to resist, but it was all in vain. The magician said that now he completely belongs to him, and he is no longer able to continue the battle. Using a set of his algorithms, the artificially created paladin realized the loss of control over his body and the inability to use black magic. He came to the conclusion that there was no point in continuing the fight. Turning to his instincts, he remembered that the best action against an invincible opponent is to escape. Seeing the incredible accumulation of power at one point in his opponent's body, Jamie was shocked that he resorted to using self-destruction. The magician could not allow the loss of this specimen and immediately rushed towards it. He used the Hand of Darkness to stop the enemy's self-destruction. He directed his energy to the place of accumulation of mana, which continued to grow its power. But as soon as he intervened in the process of self-destruction of the paladin, he realized that he could not interrupt it. Within a moment, the enemy equipment gained full power. The explosion was inevitable, while Jamie, who was next to the enemy, realized that he would not have time to dodge. The paladin's powerful energy of self-destruction filled the building, but thanks to the young magician's dark barrier, no one felt it. Jamie was able to avoid serious injury by using his pet's mana. Still, it seemed like a miracle to him that the enemy managed to get out of the dark dimension, releasing all his holy energy. But even so, he was not going to stop and ordered his pet to absorb all the light inside the building. The enemy was already running towards the window, but Jamie was not going to let him go. Directing a powerful blow in his direction, he forced the weakened enemy to reveal his true appearance. The chimera itself, which was hiding in the paladin's body, finally appeared in front of him. To stop the enemy, the magician again used the field of chains and enveloped the enemy's body. The chimera tried to resist, but all efforts had no result. Stopping the paladin, Jamie finished him off with a fatal explosion. An explosion of darkness, which destroys even strong armor, incapacitated the paladin. The enemy's physical shell was in a critical state, and the chimera could no longer move, so it resorted to using its last function. Now Jamie saw the real appearance of the enemy. The small creature left its physical shell and fled from the barrier area. Once the battle was over, Rise turned to his master to see if he was all right. He noticed that the gentleman had done an excellent job, but Jamie unexpectedly replied that he had missed the true body of the chimera. The servant was confused. He was surprised by the master's inaction, and suggested that now they must urgently track and catch up with their target. Jamie surprised him with his answer, saying that even though they missed the target, it didn't matter. Rise apologized for not understanding the master's motives, after which he politely asked if he could explain his plan. In response, the young magician said that during the battle, the chimera absorbed a lot of his black mana, traces of which are not so easy to erase. The moment the paladin was pierced through by the Hand of Darkness, he was completely filled with the black mana of the mage from the past, which meant that he could now easily track the location of his target. Meanwhile, Lincoln went about his business with a smile and did not even suspect that something was not going according to plan. Within a moment, he was shocked by the appearance of the chimera's true body at his window. He couldn't believe that the chimera Holy Knight, filled with light energy, would be destroyed. The bishop began to fear that their plan had been discovered and that the strongest masters of the Hyza lands were moving against them. Continuing the conversation, Rise expressed concern that the master's dark energy could be noticed by their opponent. In response, Jamie asked not to worry, saying that his current powers were completely different from the usual understanding of black magic. Still, he didn't understand why black magic was so weak against the holy energy that the chimera used. He explained to his servant that from the very beginning his magic was designed to kill gods. Showcasing his powerful mana, he revealed a form of darkness designed to kill sacred creatures, which also completely erases their existence, leaving no trace. This is exactly what his magic became after it was re-understood thousands of years later, in a sealed state. Therefore, no matter how hard the enemies who used holy energy tried, they could never find out about its existence. After explaining the details of his power to a concerned servant, Jamie placed the paladin's body in a magical dimension. Just as they were wondering where Hazard had gone, they heard the front door creak. The excited servant ran back and first of all asked if everything was all right with his comrade. As soon as he saw the owner, he began to rejoice, believing that now everything was in order. He admitted that he was afraid that that night would turn his bro into a pile of bones. But in response, the gentleman with a dissatisfied look said that this was his merit, since he alone dealt with the problem, after which he asked where Hazard himself had gone. The slightly confused servant said that he lost consciousness when he fell out of the window, and when he came to his senses, he immediately ran inside the building. The guys were surprised by his testimony, because it's strange to hear that a zombie lost consciousness. After this, an awkward pause began. As a measure of punishment, Hazard fell headfirst to the floor, and the gentleman sat on his back. Addressing his charges, he canceled the surveillance order and said that their actions had been noticed too quickly, and they would certainly be captured if they continued to monitor in such a careless manner. The guys took this into account. After that, Jamie released some energy and directed it at his subordinate. Rise was surprised when he felt the master's energy on his stomach. What followed was the shock that the young magician could restore his body so easily. Jamie urged him to be careful, even though he was already beyond the concept of death. Turning to the second servant, he asked him not to leave his comrade and protect him from danger. Then the young magician decided to go further. Jumping out of the window, he asked his charges to be more careful in future. Meanwhile, the bishop's indignation reached its peak. He could not understand how his impeccable paladin had suffered in battle. Moreover, he couldn't believe that an expert-level chimera created from 4 life forms could turn into something so pitiful that he placed it inside a small jar. The situation was extremely dire, and he thought about the worst. He was afraid that Swordmaster Welton might personally attack their church, since he was the only one who could destroy such a creature. But on the other hand, he understood that this was hardly possible. It seemed to him that if it had been Earl Welton, the main body of the chimera would hardly have survived. In addition, the connection between him and the paladin was severed in an instant, which meant that such a power was used by some magician who had previously used the barrier. In this region, he only saw one magician with the likely ability to use such power, and that was the young master. Still, he was sure that it was not him, because according to reports, Jamie Welton was only rank 4, while to defeat the chimera you need to be at least rank 5. As soon as he thought about increasing the speed of his experiments, a blade appeared at his throat, and someone's voice asked how he allowed his second plan to fail. A girl with gray hair with a hood on her head appeared behind him. He took the bishop's silence as a sign of agreement. With a shiver in you, the old man answered hesitantly that this is not the end. The woman arrogantly asked why their sample was in such poor condition. Justifying himself in the face of death, he shouted in panic that some obstacle stood in their way, so the paladin would be ready after a couple of experiments. In response, he was told that he was too talkative for someone who could not identify interference. The woman threatened that if the bishop did not cope, then he himself would become part of the experiment. Before she disappeared, she said that she would keep an eye on the bishop, and also warned that everything would be over if the count came into play. The old man could not believe his failure. Previously, he had no idea that 7 knights of the Church of Genis were monitoring his successes in the experiment. The swords of the Genis Church are the protectors of the Archbishop himself in the main Church of Genis. They are all master level. The bishop was filled with anger. He hoped that as soon as he finished with the experiment, he would be able to ascend to the position of Archbishop, and no one would order or threaten him anymore. Once Jamie returned to his room, he retrieved the body of the defeated paladin from another dimension and admitted that he had gone a little overboard in the battle. However, looking at the body, he noticed that seeing the Holy Chimera, one could say that the scientists of the church had created something interesting. Knowing that the paladin's body is created from different life forms, the guy decided to find out which ones. He concluded that the experimenters had done a good job of putting so many different things together. Here, insect paws and internal organs, which are fire-resistant, were used. Moreover, the paladin's eyes were compound insect eyes with quite a lot of sensitivity. The core of the paladin was the human body. A total of 4 life forms with magical resistance and excellent speed were connected, and the core was a ball filled with divine power. The experimenters created a paladin from the chimera thanks to divine power, but it was not clear why they needed such a warrior. It was logical to assume that Genis was planning to start a war. Having completed the study, Jamie stated that it does not matter to him what goal the enemies are pursuing. There is nothing more disgusting than the gods, who still continue to look at people as insects and raw materials. At that moment, memories came flooding back to him. Diablo Wolfer was filled with a desire for revenge in the name of his comrades, who called on him to live in the name of justice. Once upon a time, people already lost everything due to divine atrocities. The reason why Diablo was reborn in this world after millennia is the uprising of humanity in order to stop the arrogant and cruel gods. The strongest magician from the past was not going to tolerate their behavior a second time and was going to see the matter through to the end. Meanwhile, the bishop negotiated with the chief scientist of their experiment using a magic ball. He made excuses to him, despite the fact that their common work was crumbling into dust. Apologizing to the scientist, he excitedly said that the appearance of a third party was to blame. The scientist was beside himself with rage. He demanded that the further plan be carefully worked out. With a sly grin, the bishop said that he had another talented specimen in mind. Hearing this, the scientist immediately thought of a child with a holy essence and declared that if he received such material, he would be willing to test it with all his heart. In response, the bishop hit the table hard and shouted that this was not worth even dreaming about, because they would not waste the holy essence for the sake of some kind of chimera. Despite this, he promised that the material will not disappoint. It was about a faithful servant of the church, Ganis, the only blood relative of the holy entity, Riki. He had no idea what fate awaited him. Cleaning up the yard with a smile, he thought about what a wonderful life he had and how great it would be to become a priest. At one point, a nun approached him. She told the boy that everyone had been asked to gather in the main hall. As soon as he arrived in the main hall, he was greeted by many gazes that were directed at him. His sister and friend were already there. Ricky freaked out as soon as he saw Ben sit down next to her. Sitting down next to her, he asked him to keep his distance from Anna. As Ricky calmed down, he asked his comrades why the church suddenly decided to hold a meeting. The sister answered with a smile that perhaps the fact was that a new chosen one had appeared. Of course, she hinted at Ricky, and the guy froze, waiting for the announcement. As soon as the hall became quiet, the bishop greeted everyone present. He stated that they had great news, because another prediction had come to them from their god. The whole room was intrigued. Some suggested that this was about the same prediction as with the boy named Shino. Hearing their whispers, the hypocritical bishop laughed and said that they were all right. Everyone was shocked when they heard that Genis again wanted to get another loyal subordinate. While saying these things, the hypocritical bishop could hardly contain his laughter at the sight of the faces of those who only want to become the chosen ones. He believed that for ordinary orphans like them, becoming a paladin was truly a blessing. Hiding his evil grin, he agreed that they should be enthusiastic about this. The time has come for the announcement of the new contender, and the entire hall fell silent. Stretching his hand forward, he expectedly said that Ricky was the one their god Genis mentioned. The guy was simply shocked by this good news, not even realizing that they actually wanted to make a chimera out of him. Jamie did not even suspect that the members of the Genus sect were already planning to make a new paladin and had selected a suitable victim. On a rainy evening, he was forced to have a tea party with his mother. Tired of such events, the magician continued to diligently play his role as a loving son and said that the smell of rain was refreshing, and being with his mother was even better. After these words, he was plunged into even greater despair because of the hugs from his mother. At one point, they were disturbed by the butler. He suddenly announced that the young master had a guest. The man mentioned that he was talking about a commoner, said that he was a friend of Jamie and came to see him. Hearing that they were talking about a commoner, Jamie realized that these were not the Vale sisters. Within a moment, he realized that it was most likely the guy from the street. The guy got up from the sofa and asked the butler to bring the guest to him. As soon as Ricky entered the room, he thanked him a little bewilderedly for the opportunity to visit and apologized for the sudden intrusion. Sears was thrilled to see her son Jamie making friends. A friendly conversation followed between them, in which Ricky said that he lives in the Church of Genis. After a short dialogue, Mom asked why he decided to visit Jamie. Ricky took her question a little wrong and started talking about how they met. Hearing the beginning of his story, the young master understood what he was talking about. He immediately shut his friend's mouth and tried to take him aside so that his mother would not find out that he was leaving the mansion at night. Addressing his mother, he hesitantly said that he would go with a friend to play, while it was already time for her to rest. Seeing his actions, the woman was surprised that her son was so embarrassed to communicate with friends in front of his parents. She didn't mind, but said that in that case, Jamie should kiss her goodbye. Trying to avoid his mother's hugs, the great magician faced an even more difficult test. Still, he had no choice but to comply with her request. Seeing his friend's relationship with his parents, Ricky froze in place. As Mrs. Sears left the tea room, she wished them a good time. With a sincere smile on his face, Ricky noted that Jamie has an excellent relationship with his mother. He couldn't even imagine how hard it was for Jamie himself. The young master asked to forget about what he saw, after which he asked why he decided to visit him. In response, Ricky said that he was elected, so he would soon leave this place, and before that, he decided to say goodbye. Jamie realized that the Church of Genis was not going to stop after losing their chimera. Meanwhile, the Knight of Light Ras suffered from idleness. Over the past couple of days, he had not been able to detect the strange paladin he met during a visit to the Church of Genis. He never found out anything as he watched the church for several days and was very puzzled by the situation. While walking through the Welton family palace, he suddenly saw Ricky. As he left, the smiling guy said goodbye to the royal family and was already heading to church. At one point, he unexpectedly noticed a knight walking here and joyfully greeted him. Raz ran up to him and with a smile on his face suggested calling him Big Brother. Then he learned that Ricky was coming to his comrade for the last visit, because he had been given a prediction from their god Guinness. Hearing this, Ras was alarmed. Joyful Ricky again shouted that he had been chosen and would go to the main church in a day. Now the knight came to the full realization of how the servants of the Church of Guinness fool children and use them in their inhuman experiments. Despite his feelings, he couldn't spoil Rika's worldview. Placing his hand on his head, he said with a smile on his face that he would make an excellent priest. Ricky agreed with his words and stated that he would become someone who would help those in need, just like his older brother from the church, Pyro. After that, he said goodbye and promised that he would visit the palace of the Welton family again someday. As soon as the guy left, the Count's assassins appeared behind the knight, helping him with the task. Addressing his team, Ras Armetic assumed that they had heard everything, and then stated that in the morning they would track the cart in which Ricky would ride. He was going to show the real punishment to those who defame the service of the deities. The next morning it was time to say goodbye to the shelter. With tears in her eyes, Anna saw off her brother on the road. Addressing his friend, Ben promised that he would take care of his sister. With a sincere smile and tears of happiness, the girl asked her brother not to worry about her and wished him good luck with his studies. She was the most precious person in Ricky's life. In parting, he hugged her, after which he asked her to be sure to obey her sisters and fathers, and also to eat well. When he said goodbye, he did not hold back his emotions when he said that he would write to her constantly and would try to return as soon as he became a priest. With a smile, Anna accepted his promise and said that she would look forward to their next meeting. After saying goodbye, the carriage set off. Ricky was thoughtful about changes in his life while he was already being watched. Ras Armetic and his team went to retrieve the cart. All this time, Jamie was focused on what was happening. He had been monitoring the events at the Church of Guinness and now made sure that Ricky had hit the road. After that, he decided that it was worth checking how his bug was doing, the chimera imbued with his energy that was in the bishop's room. He verified that the traces of black mana truly belonged to the Church of Guinness. Based on the information gathered, to create a holy chimera, 3 things are needed. The first is a sacrifice. The second is the creator of the chimera supervising the experiment. And the last is a high-ranking priest who pours his holy power into the core. There is only one high-ranking priest in this area who is capable of this. So Jamie came to the conclusion that the Bishop of Janus would also take part in the creation of the chimera. He was confident that Raz and his father's knights were quite capable of dealing with the creator of the chimera on their own. The great magician was not against entrusting them with this mission, while he himself decided to take care of the bishop. With such a simple plan, he had no doubt that the enemies would not be able to finish what they started. Meanwhile, the bishop was already preparing to visit the basement in which the experiments took place. With thoughts of Riki becoming a holy knight, he put his hand through the magic mirror. On the other side, there was a boy who was going to be used as the basis of the chimera. Bringing his hand closer to him, he was excited to see if the orphan could pass the test of despair. But as soon as his hand approached the frightened young man, he stopped. His body was bound by some kind of magic, and he heard from a stranger that he should not rush. Despite the resistance, he could not suppress the enemy force. The bishop fell to the ground and the portal was closed. The angry man asked the stranger to identify himself and asked how he dared to interfere with him. Seeing a stranger in a cloak, he assumed that this was some kind of warlock. After this, the bishop shouted that he realized that most likely he was the one who defeated their holy knight. Gathering sacred energy, he nervously asked the enemy how he dared to stand in his way. Inviting the enemy to experience the wrath of God, he activated the blessed sanctuary zone. While in it, the priest increases his strength many times over. Jamie understood that if this sanctuary was created by the hands of the bishop, then his strength would increase so much that he could smash the boulder with his bare hand. Having created favorable conditions, the bishop declared that he was going to finish off the enemy quickly. After these words, he summoned sharp blades and rushed to attack. Threatening the enemy, he directed his reinforced fist towards the magician. Despite his speed, he missed with his first attack. Jamie was surprised by his incredible speed, yet he had fought little since his rebirth. Feeling superior, the arrogant Lincoln asked how the warlock was feeling. Directing his blow at the young master's body, he angrily shouted that his body would also be used to create a chimera. He believed that he was about to strike a victorious blow, but after a moment his fist stopped and despair appeared on his face. Having stopped the enemy's fist with his god-slaying magic, Jamie wondered if the bishop was capable of more. The bishop was shocked by the enemy's actions. He furiously asked why the warlock could use black magic in his sanctuary. Hearing his words, Jamie was surprised. Squeezing his captured hand, he invited the enemy to look around more closely. The bishop could not believe his eyes because his sanctuary was swallowed up in darkness. He started shouting in despair that it was impossible. In response, Jamie cheerfully clapped his hands and declared that the priest overestimated the powers of the gods. At the same moment, the magician of the past dealt a powerful blow with magic to his opponent. Unable to resist, the bishop flew into the wall. The strengthening with the help of the sanctuary stopped completely, and the blow turned out to be very effective. He no longer had any more powerful spells in reserve. Feeling no danger, Jamie walked closer and said he had questions to answer. With a mad expression on his face, Lincoln said that it was foolish to expect him to say anything. In response, with an equally crazy look, the magician from the past said that the priest had misunderstood him. Using a magical seal and moving his hand closer to his opponent's head, Jamie said that he did not need his permission. After that, he literally infiltrated the connections of the bishop's brain. The priest could not resist in any way. Even without knowing what was happening, the scientist studying chimeras could not find a place for himself. He destroyed everything around him, calling the bishop a useless idiot. Their experiment was delayed, and he feared that he himself might fall victim to the hands of the archbishop's knights. One of the priests of the church turned around and hesitantly said that he would check the whereabouts of the bishop personally. But a moment later, he caught a magic arrow in the back of his head. Enraged by the situation, the scientist got rid of his ward because he could not stand how slowly the ministers of the Church of Genis performed their duties. At the same moment, the scientist, with his body transformed through countless experiments, felt that they had unexpected guests. The knight Raz Armatic arrived to them, accompanied by the assassins of Mr. Welton. The guys made their way through the security of the entrance to the building and went inside, where they encountered a strange cabinet. As soon as they approached the bookshelves, they realized that this was the key to further rooms. The assassins felt the wind, and the girl reported that there was something behind the bookshelves. As soon as Raz came closer, he noticed that among the books there was one on which there was no layer of dust. Believing that this was the key, he tilted it towards himself. Immediately after this, the hidden door opened. The Knight of Light felt the disgusting smell of vicious creatures and reached for the hilt of his sword. He also asked his comrades to be on alert. Within a moment, an enemy chain headed towards them. Ras Armetic barely had time to react and defend himself from such an unexpected attack. He was excited because after blocking this attack, he was surprised that it was so strong. Without giving him rest, the unknown enemy continued to attack. Having blocked another blow, Raz was forced to jump to a safer distance. One of the Earl's knights excitedly turned to the leader of their group. The Knight of Light replied that he was fine, after which he shared his opinion that they had come to the right place. The huge creature, armed with a chain and a mace, was without any doubt a chimera. Meanwhile, Diablo finished gathering information. Having subdued the bishop's mind, he ordered him to inform the Count of all information regarding their activities in these lands. To be on the safe side, the magician from the past further strengthened the influence of his own spell. Without further questions, the bishop left the building and headed towards the Welton family estate. Jamie strengthened the brainwashing spell so that Lincoln would definitely not remember the recent events and the fact that the Count's son fought with him. To travel to the site of the church's atrocity, he decided to use the portal through the mirror. In order to brighten up the time a little, Jamie was going to use the appearance of a bishop. At the same time, the scientist was indignant at Lincoln's absence. He was furious because unexpected guests were already approaching, and due to the unreliability of their partner, their experiment was in jeopardy. He remembered that he still had a good option to get out of the situation. He had no choice but to send a more advanced version of the chimeras into battle to take care of the uninvited guests. In addition, he was weighed down by the fact that Riki, although a promising guy, did not possess the holy strength and body. And yet, he hoped that this experiment would satisfy the Archbishop's interest and his life would no longer be threatened. He was distracted from his thoughts by the long-awaited appearance of the bishop, who immediately apologized for his lateness. The scientist, angry at his lateness, wanted to know where he was so late, but as soon as he saw his condition, he decided to first of all ask what happened to him. Jamie, using the image of the wounded bishop, replied that he was attacked by a strange man, so he lingered while he dealt with him. Seeing the scientist's surprise, he added that he most likely encountered the one who killed the Holy Knight. He also reported that he was unable to take the enemy alive because he turned out to be too strong. The scientist assumed that that strange man was working together with those insolent people who invaded their laboratory. He urged the bishop to hurry up, because if they were delayed in any way, it would interfere with their experiment. After that, he nervously asked for the body. Jamie, in his bishop guise, was confused and asked if he really wanted to continue despite them being invaded. Handing the body of the chimera to the scientist, Jamie learned that he had already sent some kind of sample to their leadership, so he believed that everything would end soon. As soon as he received the chimera's body, he was overwhelmed with anticipation that he would soon be able to confirm the results of the experiments. After using the Chimera's body on Ricky, he wondered how powerful his creation would be this time. Continuing the experiment, he asked Lincoln's opinion. Jamie didn't expect the scientist to want to carry on the conversation, so he awkwardly replied that this specimen would be stronger than the previous one, the failed paladin. The scientist was very surprised that his friend was saying something so obvious. After that, he took out a mysterious syringe of blue liquid and said that it was time to put the finishing touches on their experiment. He pressed the Chimera's body so that it would quickly merge with the boy's body. The scientist was so excited by the process that while waiting for the result, he could not hide the trembling of his body from pleasure. Then he asked his friend if he was as happy as he was. When the bishop answered boringly that this was so, the scientist suspected something was wrong. Turning to him, he furiously asked who he really was. At that moment, Diablo realized that these two madmen had something in common, which is why he was able to figure out the substitution. Angrily shouting that he could not be deceived so easily, the scientist inflicted a surprise attack on him with magic. Jamie realized that his secret plan had failed. Meanwhile, Ross and his comrades finished the battle with the chimeras sent by the scientist. Just as they were about to go down to the basement, one of the knights was suddenly attacked by another enemy. The chimera with a huge hand pinned one of the count's subjects. Seeing this, the red-haired girl attacked the enemy's hand. But as it turned out, she was only able to slightly damage his hand. This chimera was on a completely different level compared to the ones they fought before. Ras shouted that they should change their tactics, because the descent into the basement was too narrow a place for him to carry out his attacks. At the same moment, he decided to divert the chimera's attention to himself. The Knight of Light of the Church of Pyro ran past his opponent and headed towards the room he came from. As soon as he was in a place where he could use his power, he immediately used his Sword of Justice on the enemy. With a quick lunge, he delivered an instant attack that incapacitated previous opponents. But as it turned out, this was not enough. This chimera was truly on another level, and not only survived, but did not even feel any effect from the knight's attack. The enemy struck back. Ras Armatic did not have time to dodge and thought that this was the end. At the last moment, his comrades attacked the enemy. The chimera was wounded and screamed in pain. The count's subordinates appeared in front of the Knight of Light and shouted that they needed to retreat. Ras Armatic accepted their offer, considering it reasonable, so he suggested that they first figure out how to get their comrade out. Despite his words, the assassins replied that they would abandon him here. Ras could not believe their words, so the assassins replied that they had been given orders to help the Knight of Light with their task. Tears appeared on the guy's face as soon as he heard their words that they should not pay attention to such interference that jeopardized the result of their mission. After these words, one of the assassins rushed into a desperate attack. Jumping up before the impact, he shouted that he would open a path for them to escape. The assassin who remained turned to the confused Knight of Light and said that while his comrade was distracting the enemy, they should leave immediately. In response to Ross's indignation, he said that he understood his feelings, but advised him to accept the similar fate of the ghostly knights, who act in order to obtain the most optimal results. Of course, Ras Armatic was far from the concept of absolute loyalty to the master, which was the only purpose for the existence of strong knights. Their own life is just an instrument in the hands of the Count, and Raz could not come to terms with such madness. Seeing one of the assassins struggling to hold off an opponent that greatly outnumbered him, he promised himself that he would never take such an approach. Before his eyes, the enemy dealt a terrifyingly powerful blow that destroyed part of the room. The entrance to the basement was blocked by stone barriers. Right before their eyes, the chimera raised the defeated assassin from the ground. The last of the ghostly knights asked Mr. Raz to gather his thoughts and run, but Ras Armatic could not leave the knights to die in agony. Demonstrating his cruelty, the enemy squeezed the body of the exhausted knight right before their eyes, and he began to scream in pain. Seeing this, Raz shouted that he must immediately release their comrade. Now he was determined enough to turn to the use of more destructive force. In his eyes there was hatred for the enemy and an unwillingness to come to terms with the situation. The Phantom Knight was excited by his raging mana. In response, Ras Armatic asked her not to worry, saying that he, as a holy knight, serves the goddess of mercy and justice named Pyro. Concentrating, he began to cast the Holy Martial spell. Gathering all his strength together, he struck with a furious blow. A powerful cut split the enemy's body in half. Ras Armatic is a member of the 7 Holy Knights, who were granted unique powers by the goddess of mercy and justice, Pyro. It is only suitable for short attacks, but after that, a strong reaction strikes, demonstrating a huge amount of holiness. The rescued assassin surprised his comrades. He could not believe that he was still alive. The power given to the Knights of Light to serve punishment to the wicked and endless mercy to the righteous. The guys felt great thanks to Marshall's power, but as soon as it ran out, all their suffering would be directed to the one who used it. Of course, Ras Armatic could not share this secret with them, and continued to smile as if nothing was happening. Having defeated the formidable enemy, they moved on. Meanwhile, a fierce battle began inside the laboratory. The scientist modified his tissues to deliver blows. In order to dodge them, Jamie was forced to use the wings of his pet. Calling his opponent a fucking black magician, the furious scientist asked how he dared to interfere with his incredible experiments. Jamie was surprised, saying that he could not even think that he would hear such words from someone who abused his body so much. In response, the scientist, filled with fanaticism, called him a fool for not being able to unsee real art. Showing off his more advanced form with large black wings, he angrily said that he would now put on a special performance for the unexpected guest. Disappointed in his choice of opponent, Jamie awkwardly replied that chimera wings were in poor taste. Of course, his words caused the enemy to lose control of himself even more. He plunged into a deep rage. Jamie did not stop mocking him, and within a moment he tore the scientist's core material out of the boy's body with the help of his god-killing magic. Clenching his fist, he cheerfully declared that he was quite interested in playing with such material of poor experiments. After these words, the magic around the chimera's body contracted, and the material was destroyed, and the magician from the past began to taunt the enemy, demonstrating that he did it by accident. As expected, after such a sudden action, the scientist completely went crazy with rage. Diablo Wolfer was very cruel to the mental health of the enemy. He summoned a magical seal and, surprised by the scientist's emotions at the loss of one toy, suggested that he change the place for further actions. After these words, his seal expanded and both fighters came under its influence. This was unexpected for the church scholar Gennis. The man assumed that this was the magic of spatial movement. He thought that there wouldn't be a wet spot left of it if he took care of its destruction. Having hit the barrier, he arrogantly thought that he could deal with the petty magician without any problems, which was getting on his nerves. But as soon as he saw that the enemy's technique was not susceptible to his blows, he realized that it would not be possible to tear this magic into pieces. The scientist was shocked that the battle was not under his dictation. Captured by spatial magic, he began to nervously bite his lip and began to shout insults to his opponent. All this disrespect towards the young magician did not matter because within a moment they appeared in a more suitable place for battle. It was a forest far from people. Filled with anger, the scientist asked why he was unable to break through this magic. In response, Jamie decided to put even more pressure on his psyche and harshly declared that he was simply terribly weak. Arrogantly pointing his hand at him, the great magician from the past, Diablo Wolfer, suggested that the enemy with mental trauma take a little rest and have some fun in the forest. With a crazed look, he continued his speech and said that as soon as the game time ended, he would tear the body of the naive scientist into pieces and make him his personal slave. Trying to attack the enemy with tentacles, the scientist furiously shouted that the dirty magician thought too much of himself. Humming a tune, Jamie avoided injury without much difficulty and dodged every attack. Jumping a little higher onto a tree branch, he suggested out loud that the affairs in the basement had probably already been sorted out. In response, the scientist with an evil grin said that he would send 2 elite chimeras, so you should not be sure that everything went smoothly for your comrades. Hearing this, Jamie became more serious. The scientist was not going to slow down the pace of the battle. Strengthening his hands with a chimera, he shouted that the magician should not be distracted during the battle. After that, he dealt a powerful blow to the tree on whose branch Diablo was sitting. Having wings at his disposal, the magician from the past was not at all worried about this. Continuing his speech, the smug scientist hoped that he would piss the guy off by saying that although his comrades were able to somehow deal with 1 elite chimera, after such a battle, they would not be able to defeat the second specimen. After a thoughtful pause, Diablo Wolfer calmly said that the madman had crossed all boundaries of reason. Rushing into another attack, the scientist replied that this was not madness, but confidence in his own abilities. Continuing to observe the enemy, Diablo was able to figure out that he had implanted 7 different life forms into his body, so it was difficult to call him a human. In fact, he didn't even expect that this whole ridiculous combination would show good results. Feeling the jitters and delight of battle, he began to make a magical, dense sphere for attack with the thought that he wanted to get such a servant. Meanwhile, the guys freely went down to the basement, not expecting any more danger. Seeing this place, one of the knights was shocked that it belonged to the church. The Knight of Light suggested that they hurry up and find the child, realizing that he only had 20 minutes left before Marshall's will was unleashed, a side effect of his divine sword power. The guys began to look around the room but did not find anything interesting. Then Rast decided to open the door to the next room, which seemed suspicious to him. Within a moment, he sensed danger. It was a huge amount of evil energy. Addressing his comrades, he asked them to be careful. The approach of an enemy attack forced him to instantly react and save his comrade from the affected area. When he saw the enemy, he was so shocked that he could not move. A chimera appeared in front of him with the body of a woman who had wings. He could not believe his eyes that there would be an even more dangerous, vile creature here, who, moreover, would be armed. After this, one of the ghostly knights turned to him and anxiously asked him to look at another unpleasant news. They discovered another chimera that combined an ogre and a demonic horse. Ras, our medic, was shocked by this, realizing that these were monsters that even experts could not cope with. He was afraid that he himself was not able to do anything to oppose such creatures. But just the thought of the child made him more determined than ever. Taking out his blade, he called on his comrades to prepare for battle. They were very close to Ricky. The guy began to regain consciousness after the ministers of the Church of Genis tried to intervene in his body. As he stood up, his eyes began to glow and his body was spreading a noticeable amount of divine energy. Looking around the room, he did not understand what he was doing here and where the priest had disappeared. There was no one around him, but he noticed strange vessels. Looking closer, he saw a man he knew. With horror on his face, he realized that this was Shino. Ricky was shocked by what he saw, not understanding what he was doing here in such a terrible way. Now a puzzle began to form in his head. The words that they were chosen by God lost any meaning for him. The guy realized that something like this could not be called a blessing. He realized the horror of the situation, his body began to tremble, and tears appeared in his eyes. Despite all this, he found the strength to pull himself together. In such a situation, he did not know how to help the child. It was enough that he found the determination to leave this place. Nevertheless, his upbringing made itself felt. Before he left, he turned to someone he truly considered a friend. Despite the trembling in his body, he promised that he would definitely come back for him. Ricky promised that the Church of Genis would not get away with all these horrific crimes. But now, all he had on his mind was how to get out and find people who would help him return to the city. Remembering the path he had taken, Ricky headed towards the exit. While returning to the stairs, he heard some noise and assumed that someone had come to his aid. They were nearby, and a curious child decided to see who was involved in the fight. The battlefield looked frightening, and he thought that it would be better to return. But as soon as he saw the guys who were fighting desperately, his soul became much easier. He was filled with joy when he saw a knight who was friendly to him. With his body trembling, Ras, our medic, could barely withstand the strikes of the elite chimera. Happy at such a meeting, Ricky did not even notice that they were in a difficult situation. Raz couldn't believe that he was still okay, and had even found a way out on his own, so he friendly responded that he could call him Big Brother. At the same moment, the chimera discovered a weak and unarmed target. Following her instincts, she rushed to attack to quickly reduce the number of enemies. Not having time to do anything, Ras asked his comrades to help. The Phantom Knights rushed to the boy's defense, but the chimera was much faster, and within a moment was next to Ricky. The guys didn't have time to help him. Feeling somewhat panicked, the Knight of Light shouted to Ricky that he must flee from this place. The fighter who was closest to the enemy suddenly became stuck due to the destroyed floor. Frightened by the enemy, Ricky could not move. The enemy was a moment before the strike. Ras Armadic, unable to help, shouted the boy's name. He tried to reach the enemy with a long-range sword attack, but this blow did not bring any results. The rest were already attacked by the second elite chimera. With tears in his eyes, the Knight of Light realized that everything was in vain. He thought that despite all his efforts, he could not change his fate. At the last moment, Ricky fearfully extended his hand forward. He bit his lip, resigned to his death. As he said goodbye to his older brother, he didn't even notice how divine power began to ooze from his body. To the surprise of everyone present, the terrible destructive force of the chimera's blow did not harm the boy. Shocked by what happened, Raz urged the boy to quickly run towards him. Ricky immediately rushed towards him. Being under his protection, he was not afraid of enemies. Raz looked around to analyze the situation. The Phantom Knights could barely cope with the many heavy enemy attacks. The church minister, Pyro, understood that he had no more than 10 minutes left. He couldn't fight while he was protecting Ricky. Turning to the boy, he asked him to go upstairs first. The guy agreed, because he understood that if he stayed here, he would only hinder his saviors. After that, he rushed towards the exit. Turning to his older brother, he asked him to return safe and sound. In response, Ras Armedic raised his fist in agreement. Now he needed to focus on the battle. One of the elite chimeras has already fallen from the joint attacks of the guys. An enemy rushing towards him was a combination of a demonic horse and an orc. With incredible anger in his eyes, Raz shouted that he would grind his enemy into powder. As he walked up the stairs, Ricky couldn't stop thinking about what happened. When the enemy attacked him, he instinctively began to defend himself. At that moment, a lot of energy appeared around his body that he had not possessed before. After this light scared the monster away, Ricky noticed that his stomach was growling. In addition, he was surprised by the strange feeling that he experienced when he saw the monster. As he approached the exit, he remembered that it reminded him of the feeling of anger he felt when he worked for the Laval criminals. The entrance door to this gloomy building appeared in front of him. Then he finally got out. Ricky paused for a moment to catch his breath. Looking up at the heavens, the guy wondered if it was all a lie. Words about salvation and faith in a deity suddenly became just a lie for him. because of which he began to lose the desire to live. At the same moment, he remembered that his sister Anna was alone in the shelter. He was afraid that someone might harm her. From this thought, he felt some terrible feeling, hatred for those who could harm her. Looking around, it seemed to him that he should go forward. In front of him was a mysterious forest. The guy ran further into the depths. This place seemed distant from people, and there was a feeling that it was hiding some kind of secret. Meanwhile, the scientist was incredibly furious. He shouted to the young magician that he would not be able to escape, and that his end would soon come. Jamie didn't expect the enemy to hold out for so long. He had to fly up to dodge another attack. The mad scientist's powerful attacks caused many explosions inside the forest. At that moment, the great magician from the past paid tribute to his strength, realizing that he would not be happy if such an attack hit him. Despite the danger of the situation, he thought that his magic should be enough, and if the battle continued in the same spirit, he would emerge victorious. With incredible hatred, the scientist continued to attack his enemy. He shouted that the jokes were over. Jamie was alarmed by his strength and was forced to continue dodging while waiting for the right moment to make the final attack. Calling on the enemy to die, the scientist again used the power of the chimera. Many tentacles were aimed at the young magician, who diligently dodged them while in the air. At one point, the scientist lost sight of him. Looking around, he shouted that there was no point in hiding. Jamie decided to take a long break and, jumping onto a tree branch, prepared to use magic. He used a dark dimension spell. The scientist plunged into his trap. Seeing this, he shouted that it was useless to try to restrain him. Having destroyed the magician's spell, he again rushed to the attack. Jamie knew there was no time to evade. Attacking the enemy, the mad scientist with the body of a chimera used a tentacle hurricane spell. The young magician barely had time to defend himself from this attack, using magic chains that could not penetrate the enemy tentacles. He found it amazing that the enemy was able to combine the chimera's abilities with magic. However, he did not think that this would cause problems, believing that he was not capable of more. The scientist shouted that he was sincerely surprised that his opponent had lasted so long. After that, he suggested taking the matter more seriously and ending this battle. But after a moment, the magician shocked him by disappearing from sight and suddenly appearing behind him. Anticipating the attack, he jumped back and prepared to block the attack. But at the same moment, the enemy again disappeared from his field of vision. The mysterious magician found himself on the tree branch again, and the angry scientist shouted that he was sure that he saw him in front of him. In response, Jamie decided to play with his nerves even more, and called him blind, because he could not recognize the clone. We are talking about dark magic of the 4th rank called Double. This is a magic used to create a clone capable of partially using the same abilities as the owner. After making eye contact, the clone disappears. Collecting mana in his hand to launch an attack, Jamie shouted that the scientist was left a fool because he was not even capable of assessing the strength of his opponent. After that, he used a body decomposition spell, and the enemy's arm began to lose strength. From such pain, an unbearable pain appeared in his body, which was accompanied by trembling. In response, the scientist furiously shouted that this was a cheap trick that would stop working as soon as the magician was killed. Jamie agreed with his words and added that this is why he has an ace up his sleeve. He talked about the black balls that he managed to prepare before the next attack. While in the air, the scientist with the body of a chimera saw many targets in front of him, but did not sense their danger. Within a moment, they crashed into his body. Although they did not have destructive power, when faced with them, the scientist began to experience unbearable pain at the points of contact. The fact is that the black ball is a spell in which the pain experienced increases 3 times upon contact with it. Flying up to the enemy, the young magician asked what it was like to experience such terrible pain in a battle in which from the very beginning you feel like a winner. He was surprised that the enemy could still respond. For educational purposes, Diablo Wolfer decided to use the gravity spell. The enemy's body quickly crashed into the surface. Having knocked his opponent to the ground, Jamie decided that he would no longer need the help of his pet. Therefore, he praised him for his help and offered to rest. The scientist tried to rise, his wings losing their strength and his body trembling from exhaustion and the incredible pressure of gravity. Turning to him, Jamie was surprised that he was still conscious despite so much pain. He also asked how he managed to abuse his body so much, diluting it with many chimeras. Placing his hand on the enemy's head, he began to use his power and said that due to the enemy being so destroyed, he wasn't sure if he could use it as an undead, so he decided that he would at least gain some knowledge. As soon as he decided to use his power, he sensed danger. He had to jump to a safe distance, because the enemy still had some trump cards up his sleeve. Jamie canceled his spells on the scientist as soon as he realized that he had miscalculated. The enemy was able to summon 2 more chimeras. The situation suddenly changed. Diablo was not ready to continue the battle and began to get nervous because he had spent too much mana. After that, he cast a spell and dealt a powerful blow to the enemy's body. But this attack was not fatal. With a joyful expression on his face, Jamie suggested that he die, because in this case, it would be easier for both of them. In fact, he was simply stalling for time, since he did not think that the enemy would be able to hold out for so long. Now he didn't have many options on how to defeat his opponent. Riki continued to walk deeper into the forest. It seemed to him that he had to do this, although the closer he got, the more nauseous he began to feel, and his body trembled even more. At one point, he heard a sudden powerful explosion. Sensing danger, he thought that he should not go in that direction. But at the moment of the next explosion, he felt something familiar. The body of a man in a dark cloak fell next to him. It was Jamie. He did not have time to dodge the enemy attack, and another one was aimed at him. Since he miscalculated the use of mana, he could no longer even use the shield. Seeing the face of the mysterious magician, Riki recognized his friend and wondered what he was doing here. Directing a magical attack towards the exhausted enemy, the evil and mad scientist called on him to die. Without the use of a shield, such a clot of magic was impossible to reflect, having the abilities of a 10-year-old boy. Realizing that Jamie was about to die from the attack of the madman from the laboratory, Riki desperately rushed towards him. Remaining somewhat calm, even in such a hopeless situation, Jamie was surprised to see this guy here. Using the chimera, the scientist unleashed a powerful volley of magical energy. Despite the young master's cry that the guy shouldn't get closer, Riki covered him and said apologetically that his body was moving on its own. As a result of a powerful explosion, they were both injured. Jamie was shocked by what was happening. With a trembling in his body, he began to crawl towards his comrade. The boy was unconscious. For the first time since Diablo's rebirth, Wolfer was in such despair. He couldn't believe he had failed again. While fighting the gods and their followers, he had to endure a lot of pain. Even after he gained a second life, he could not avoid the mistake that haunted him in the past. Someone died because of him again. In the past, every battle brought him to despair. Before his death, his comrades shouted that he must live on. To save him, another person sacrificed his own life. Being near the body of his comrade, he begged him to regain consciousness. Seeing his behavior, the vile scientist began to gloat, laugh, and shout that he was enjoying the touching scene that his simple test subject had made. Turning to the magician, who was immersed in the darkness of memories, the scientist shouted that he would now get rid of both of them. But Diablo Wolfer didn't even pay attention to him. Memories from the past about his beloved and faithful comrades began to emerge in his head. He had many followers. Before they died, they screamed for the leader to leave them, but not to forget them. In a desperate situation, Diablo began to use the primal power of rebellion against the divine. The chimeras sensed the danger posed by the enemy, and the scientist began to get nervous as soon as he noticed that the magician's aura had completely changed. The mad scientist knew that he should end the battle as quickly as possible, but he could not control the trembling in his body. Jamie leaned over his comrade's body. With a look filled with the lust to kill, he asked the enemy to wait until he finished. The magician could not understand how he could forget about the very first power that he created. At the same moment, skeletons began to break out of the ground. Many undead came out during the use of his power. Worried about what was happening, the scientist panicked and asked who the magician was who had interfered with their experiments. Using necromancy, Diablo Wolfer, in the body of a young master, summoned an army that was created to rebel against the deities and confront the 12 gods. In response, the self-confident scientist was surprised that the guy was going to kill him with the undead, which he called weak. Hearing this, Jamie said that these were the ones who suffered at the hands of the scientist. After that, he urged them to attack the killer to recoup all the pain he caused. Countless numbers of undead rushed at the pathetic scoundrel and his chimeras. Their number was simply incredible. They all rushed at the bodies of the chimeras, trying to destroy them. The chimeras began to desperately resist. Destroying the undead body was not a problem, but this seemed an easy task only at first glance, because the dark magician's subordinates had surpassed the concept of death. Recovering, they drove the scientist into a corner. He began to scream in panic, but at the same moment, his mouth was closed by one of those whom he had hurt in the past. Extending his hand towards him, Diablo Wolfer declared that this was his domain, where death inevitably reaped death. The undead knocked the scientist to the ground, and he began to understand what it was like to be in hell itself. As soon as the subordinates managed, the caster ordered them to move away from the defeated killer. Jamie was upset, realizing that most likely the enemy was already dead. But as it turned out, he found the strength to rise a little. During that movement, he spat out a mysterious sphere. Picking it up, Diablo was surprised, because in his hands was an artifact charged with life force, known as the life bead. Considering the fact that the scientist disfigured his body, the great magician of the past understood that he could not exist just like that. This meant that he was hiding something that could help him exist. The appearance of this item exceeded all of Diablo's expectations, because with such an artifact, he could go beyond the boundaries of his child's body. Each skeleton enjoyed the sight of their killer being punished. His army continued to watch what was happening. The magician ordered them to return, saying that they would be needed someday during the justice of the disgusting murderers. After his words, the undead disappeared underground again. Jamie suddenly coughed up blood. He had spent too much energy. Besides, rebelling against the divine was still a complex power that he had not gained complete control over. Despite his weakness, he could not afford to lose consciousness. He was able to verify that Riki was still alive, but he was in serious condition, and Diablo could not simply let him die. Addressing him, he said that instead of giving his life like this, it would be better if he became his faithful servant. Calling him a sinner, he cast a spell, but as soon as he touched the boy's body, it began to release divine power. Jamie couldn't believe he hadn't noticed Riki had it earlier. After this, divine mana began to overflow the area. The magician was forced to cover his face from the light that blinded him. A woman's voice said that she could not understand what was happening. A girl in white clothes and long green hair appeared in front of Jamie, and with her hands she lifted the body of his comrade, who had been injured in the battle. Addressing the young magician, the woman called him a child and asked who he was to try to steal what belonged to her. Jamie was shocked by her sudden appearance and said her name out loud. It was the goddess Pyro, and she was surprised that the unfamiliar child recognized her. Meanwhile, the bishop, who had fallen under the influence of Diablo's magic, walked towards the Welton family mansion and pronounced his mission. Hearing that he was going to tell the count everything, the archbishop's knights immediately got rid of him. Their experiments failed, so they cleaned up their tracks. By getting rid of the church on the lands of Haze, he carried out the so-called justice against heretics. Luckily, Ras Armatic and his comrades completed the task. He barely had time to invest, and was in such pain that he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Despite this, the smile did not disappear from his face. He was glad that no one died. The ghostly knights ran up to him to make sure he was okay. Suddenly, Ras Armatic felt that his holy sword began to spread a huge amount of divine energy. The bright light blinded everyone around. Feeling it begin to penetrate his body, he realized what it was all about. This was the Holy Knight's reaction to the appearance of the deity Pyro, whose power he proudly used. Meanwhile, Lady Pero continued to ask the young man how he knew who she was. Jamie, in an exhausted state after a difficult battle, did not understand how things could worsen so unexpectedly. It was unclear how she came down to earth, and he also felt incredible pressure because of her presence. The guy with a pained face clutched his head at the moment when the goddess asked if he could hear her voice. Pyro ordered him to answer her question immediately, her patience at the limit. Still, Jamie could no longer resist, so he shouted back to her that he only knew that Riki's holiness belonged to her. Hearing this, the goddess asked to clarify whether he, understanding this fact, was really going to turn this man into his undead. Jamie answered sincerely that he just didn't want him to die. With incredible rage and an angry expression on her face, Pyro asked if he really believed that being undead meant being alive. She said it was an act of disrespect for the dead. Diablo Wolfer couldn't help himself as soon as she asked why he didn't realize the value of life. His patience came to an end, and in response he furiously shouted that she was God's bitch, that she was one of those who belittle life, after which he added that it was divine beings who were to blame for all the troubles of humanity. Pyro was shocked by his words. Moreover, he angrily asked how she dares to talk about such things after sacrificing all of humanity. Instead of anger, the goddess reacted extremely strangely and wanted to justify herself, but stopped immediately after saying that she had nothing to do with this. Without finishing her speech about the sacrifice of humanity, she warned the magician that the child in her hands would become her future apostle. She threatened that if he became undead, then she would not forgive him. The apostle is the one who is closest to the gods. People with such a divine title have enough strength to earn the title of the strongest holy knight. As it turns out, Diablo did know he had godhood, but didn't expect it was going to elevate him to apostle status. He assumed that it was because of this that Pyro was able to descend to Earth. With a sly smile on his face, he thought that in this case everything would turn out much more fun than he expected. Looking at the goddess, he apologized without any fear and asked how he could make amends. The goddess did not understand what kind of guilt we were talking about. So the guy with a sweet and innocent smile answered that darkness was already taking over the boy, and half of Riki had already become undead. Hearing this, Pero was shocked and angrily shouted if he knew what he had done. Her furious scream gave the guy a headache, and he thought that Pero was an extremely stupid woman. With a threatening look, she asked him if he was really seeking his own death by such actions. Experiencing some discomfort due to her pressure, the great magician in the body of a child replied that if he really strived for death, then things would take a bad turn. In confirmation, he added that if the goddess kills him, she will also destroy Riki. Pero didn't believe his audacity and asked furiously if he really thought such pathetic threats would help him escape death. In response, Jamie confidently said that only one person can be an apostle, and if she misses Ricky, she will have to spend a lot of time looking for a new one. The goddess could not say anything in response. The arrogant magician suggested that she forget about the wasted time, because what is more important is that the presence of an apostle guarantees the unlimited appearance of the deity on Earth. Looking at Ricky, Jamie called him a friend and reiterated that he had no desire to kill the boy. Calling the magician a vicious person, Pyro said that he had invented a very good story in order to save his miserable life. In response, he asked why she made the guy her apostle. He was interested, because at this time there are no reasons why she vitally needs an apostle, because the world exists, as the 12 gods planned very calmly. He called this existence a system on which all 12 gods work together, after which he asked whether he was right in his judgments. Nervously biting her lip, Pyro, who had been outplayed by the man, asked how much he knew. Extending his hand upward, Jamie said that she is the most holy of the 12 gods, whose love reaches absolutely everyone, and is so overwhelmed with this feeling that she has received the power to destroy evil. With a crazed and piercing gaze, he assumed that she had been banished from heaven. The goddess could not contain her anger, which was visible even from the expression on her face. She wanted to call him a scumbag, but stopped in time. With a smile on his face, Jamie was not even afraid to look her straight in the eyes, realizing that this dispute was final, because she cannot lie, because this lie goes against holiness, so she needs to remain silent. After that, he spoke his name from the past. Shocked by the name, Pyro asked how a mage from this era knew who Diablo Wolfer was. With his hand on his heart, Jamie declared that he was the man's legacy. Pyro considered this impossible, remembering that after their incredibly difficult battle, that incredible human magician was sealed. In addition, she did not understand why all this was happening at such an inconvenient time. Without fearing the goddess, Diablo asked if she would mind shaking hands. Disappearing, Pyro invited him to come to her in Afton, where they would discuss everything in detail. As soon as she left, Ricky fell to the ground. Looking at the boy, Jamie thought that if everything went well, then he would have a very useful tool. After contact with Pyro, Ricky finally returned to consciousness. Seeing Jamie in front of him with his usual dissatisfied expression on his face, he was surprised that he was still around. As soon as he remembered what happened before he lost consciousness, he shouted to his comrade if he was okay. He was afraid that he was in pain, because he was visibly injured, because there was blood all over his clothes. In addition, he noticed that the young master's eyes had turned purple, and also said that he had some strange sensations in his body. In a calm tone, Jamie was surprised that even in this state, Ricky was worried primarily about someone else, and not about himself. He further explained what happened, not forgetting to mention that he was a future apostle, while he made him half undead with the help of his dark magic. Jamie was sure that after learning this, Ricky would hate him, but as it turned out, the boy took it calmly and said with a smile that everything was clear to him now. Hearing his words, Diablo felt a little uneasy. Explaining his calm, Ricky suggested that just because Jamie was a dark wizard, that didn't mean he had to be evil. To be fair to those who considered him a friend, Diablo admitted without any doubt that he knew that Ricky would be sent to a dangerous place, then added the even more stunning fact that he even tried to kill his sister. Even so, the boy with godly strength summed up that Jamie saved him in the end and didn't even touch Anna, so he's still a good guy. Not understanding the feelings of the strange guy, Jamie nervously called him a simpleton. As soon as the future apostle touched his body, the magician was surprised that as soon as his divine magic spread, the incurable wounds on his body began to disappear. Ricky himself was surprised by this effect. He said that he thought it would work, so he tried it. Within a moment, he felt that Brother Ras was approaching them. In response, Jamie said that in that case it was time for him to leave. As he left, he asked Ricky to forget about what they were talking about. As it turned out, the boy was sympathetic to his secrets and double life, so he agreed to fulfill the request and said goodbye amicably. Meanwhile, Earl Welton and the Knight of Light arrived at the Church of Genis of his lands, where the judge of the organization reported to him. He apologized for the fact that, due to certain circumstances, he could not give his name. In response, Mr. Argino asked what the judges were doing here. The man explained that they came on orders from their superiors to hunt down the heretics. Further, the judge showed the chimera to the count, saying that, as it turned out, Father Lincoln turned out to be a heretic. After he admitted this, their knights executed the infidel. As soon as Ras heard this, he began to get angry, realizing that the Church of Genis was using the bishop as a scapegoat. When the judge began to say that this was an important matter, kept in the strictest confidence in the church, because of which they conducted an investigation, Ras Armitic could not stand it and shouted that it was all nonsense. The excited guy did not have time to finish his speech. Mr. Welton, in a calm and indicative tone, let him know that this was enough. With a sly smile, he said that he should praise the courage of the judges, or even sympathize with them. After that, he declared with piercing eyes and an angry tone that they dared to kill someone in his domain. He asked if they really intended to share the bishop's fate. As soon as the judge realized the seriousness of his intentions, which put him in mortal danger, he fell to his knees in front of the master and hesitantly shouted that they were simply punishing sinners in the church. In response, Mr. Arjano said that in these lands he is the only one who is the judge, so no one dares to harm the people in Haze without his permission. The judge, with a trembling in his body, tried to justify himself. But the count did not listen to him, and angrily said that the Church of Genus had crossed all boundaries. Standing in front of one of the strongest sword masters, the judge feared that he would die at this rate. Despite this risk, he could not retreat. Rising to his feet, he decided to demonstrate his character, and called the count too arrogant because it would be unwise for him to turn his back to the Church of Janus. But as soon as he raised his hand, Mr. Arjano struck with lightning speed. With one precise movement, he cut off the insolent man's hand and he fell to his knees again. Squeezing his hand to stop the bleeding, the judge heard that his right hand would be next, and then his head. The count seriously said that if he wants to remain with his head on his shoulders, then he should immediately leave the lands of Haze. Razar Medic was simply shocked by the count's thoughtful actions. Although the judge did not say a word about chimeras, Mr. Arjano skillfully diverted his attention and showed this servant his true place. He understood that if everything continued like this, their side of the conflict would definitely win. But the judge could not fail his mission. He bowed his head at the count's feet and apologetically promised that their church would pay compensation so that they would forgive their mistake this time. Begging the gentleman to come to his senses, the judge thought about his duty. He had to remember that Haze is an opportunity to expand the eastern lands of the influence of the church. Passing by the judge, the gentleman firmly stated that he would not change his decision because the church had lost his trust. Therefore, he decided to sever all ties with the Church of Genus. The count left, but the ministers of various churches remained in this place. Now Ras Armetic has seen with his own eyes how Mr. Welton conducts business. The judge had no choice but to leave. With a smile on his face, the Knight of Light was glad that it was all over. Due to the severity of the count's decision as a result of the incident, the Genus Church paid a huge compensation and disappeared from the lands, and a sudden visitor came for Riki and Anna. The holy marshal of the church, Pyro, knelt before them and introduced himself properly. Addressing the children, he stated that Riki would become a symbol of the Pyro Church as an apostle of the goddess. At the same time, Anna will awaken as a saint, and when this happens, she will begin to observe the world with her holy eyes. Ras Armetic promised that Afton would do his best to welcome them. Riki took the Knight of Light by the hand, and could not help but feel joy that one day Anna would be able to see with her own eyes. A church representative confirmed that they will be able to open them soon. Laughing joyfully, Riki hugged his sister. They say that the simultaneous appearance of an apostle and a saint is a sign of impending troubles. But with his hand on his heart, the marshal accepted these words with a smile. Addressing the goddess, he declared that if misfortunes came, then he would honorably protect such bright children. This is how the two found themselves under the full protection of the Pyro Church. At the same time, Diablo Wolfer understood that he would soon come face to face with a test of fate. At this time, 12 gods are divided into factions, and most likely this prompted Genus to create holy knights from chimeras. The great magician and true protector of humanity assumed that the goddess of mercy, Pyro, was to some extent isolated. To be sure of this, he had to go to Afton. In fact, he was ready for any challenge, but before that, he still had urgent matters to attend to. Having mentally prepared himself, Diablo Wolfer once again took on the role of Jamie, who loves his mother. This time the guy's mother and sister were a little surprised. Jamie continued to play his part very diligently and rushed to hug them, saying that he really enjoyed having tea with them. Mom was surprised, saying that he usually finds it boring. Confused, Jamie began to make excuses. He was surprised that this woman still guessed about his true feelings. With a sincere smile on her face, Mom suggested that he needed something from her. Jamie knew that next time he would have to try better and think through each step in more detail. In response, he said that he was just in a good mood. Hearing this, my mother asked me not to hesitate and suggested moving on to his request. As it turned out, he wanted to visit his mother's homeland, Afton. It was difficult for him to maintain the image, but still he said that he would like to see with his own eyes a mountain with huge bubbles. But Sears did not give up and decided to blackmail him, saying that she would like to see his cute behavior. Seeing that Jamie was not even trying to satisfy her desire, she said that in this case, the trip would have to be rescheduled. Hearing her words, Diablo Wolfer, the great dark magician of humanity, thought that he had never retreated from any difficulties. After that, he made a heart with his fingers and sweetly said that he loved his mother. After the words were spoken, Diablo began to feel depressed, while his mother replied that after what she saw, she had no choice but to agree with her beloved son's request. Diablo was completely self-absorbed when he learned that none of this was necessary, since they were planning to leave for Afton next week anyway. On the verge of despair, he thought that he would kill Pyro for this as soon as she became useless to him. Then he went out into the street, where he met the Knight of Light, who had just been walking here before leaving for Afton. Ras Armatic asked why he was sad, even though he was at a tea party with his mother and sister. Feeling the unpleasant divine power of the Knight of Light, Jamie said that he was sad because of certain incidents, so that he would not ask unnecessary questions. As soon as Raz began to cheerfully support him and tell him that everything would work out, Diablo even thought about killing him at that very moment. To avoid such premature action, he asked what he was doing, and he replied that he had something to discuss with the Duke. As it turned out, he informed Mr. Argino that he was going back. With a smile, he said that he had a feeling that Jamie was about to hear something interesting from him. The point was that Ricky and Anna would go with him. For Diablo, this was obvious, because they would become an integral part of the earthly power of the goddess Pero, but still he had to show surprise so as not to arouse suspicion. Then Ras Armetic unexpectedly announced that farewells do not last forever, which further strained the morale of the magician. The priest went on to say that Ricky and Anna would never forget him, and that although he didn't know when they would see each other again, it would be great to see each other as adults. In response, Jamie barely managed to ask himself what he was trying to say. Unexpectedly for him, Ras did one more thing for which Diablo would like to kill the Knight of Light in the same place. The priest unexpectedly hugged him tightly. Then Ras sincerely said that he would like their friendship not to end. He asked the young magician not to be sad and not to be sad because this is not the end. As he said goodbye, he finished off the young gentleman with the words that he would visit them often. Diablo Wolfer began to hold an even greater grudge against Pyro, due to the fact that she could not keep her offspring in one place. Meanwhile, Earl Welton and his wife decided to discuss recent events. As it turned out, their reason for traveling to Afton was the desire of their son-in-law to bring their son Jamie to him. It seemed strange, my mother noted, that she was not sure that even her late mother would have done something like that. Mr. Argino doubted whether his son-in-law really just wanted to see Jamie. They set off the next day, but without the Count, because he could not leave the land due to the tense situations inside. His wife hugged him tenderly and said that there was no need to worry about their trip, because they would be accompanied by the best knightly order of the Earl of Welton. With a blush on her face, she said that no one would dare threaten them, because her husband was Earl Welton himself. Her pleasant and caring compliment caused the man to laugh with satisfaction. In addition, they were given even more confidence in their trip by the fact that Ras Armetic, who turned out to be the holy marshal of the Church of Pyro, was going to Afton with them, although priests of such high rank most often do not leave the location of the main church. This only meant that the church took the incident with the appearance of a scientist who creates chimeras using people very seriously. Nevertheless, the Count admitted to his wife that he was worried about the fact that their son's strength was developed beyond his years. Last time, during a visit to Count Simon's palace, the young master was unable to suppress his emotions and unleashed his terrifying power, despite his age. The man was not sure whether the leader of the order would be able to stop him if something like this happened again. But the wife expressed the opinion that they should not worry about it. In confirmation, she decided to mention that awkward incident for her son when he was forced to behave extremely nicely. After telling this story, they began to laugh, and Mr. Welton said with emotion that he would like to see it with his own eyes. Taking her husband by the hand, the lady said that everyone makes mistakes and she believes in their son. They were both glad that they were finally able to meet before the trip. As soon as evening came, Jamie left the family mansion again and was incredibly happy that he was finally able to finish the long-planned task. It took longer to absorb the life bead due to the fact that it had to be ground into powder. But the action turned out to be even much better than he thought, and all thanks to his hard and painstaking work. He could only share his success with his pet. Turning to him, he said that since they were very lucky to find such an artifact, reaching the 6th rank of magic was now only a matter of time. He had a long way to go to regain his old self, but now he could easily deal with someone of the same level as that mad scientist from the Church of Janus. Then he went to some forgotten forest hut. This was the meeting place with his charges. After they had greeted each other, Jamie told the servants that he was going to Afton, and since he was far away, he would be gone for some time. Hearing about Afton, Rise was saddened, realizing that he was on the northern border of the state, and such a journey would take a very long time. In turn, Hazard began to press for pity due to the fact that he did not want to be hunched over with axes in the role of lumberjacks all this time. Jamie was surprised that he had questions, so he asked in a disgruntled tone if there were any problems. In order not to delay too long, he asked them not to worry and said that this time they would go with him. Releasing the energy of rebellion against the deities, Diablo said that he remembered something that he had long forgotten. Due to the presence of this energy, the servants began to feel strange and worriedly asked what kind of scary thing was going to appear in front of them. Even the more well-mannered Rise decided to ask what it was. Opening the door, Jamie was surprised by the interest of the resurrected servants and said that this was his storage of undead. Pointing his finger at the guys, he explained the situation to them more clearly, telling them that this was now their new home. Looking inside, Reese was surprised by the atmosphere, and Azard admitted that he didn't particularly want to live in such a frightening place. Diablo was surprised by such words because none of his undead had objected so far. Kicking the guys towards the entrance, he asked them to stop chatting. The guys could not deny his order and somehow ran inside. With a smile on his face, Diablo thought that these two servants were entertaining. It seemed funny how clearly their emotions were expressed. It was clear that they would be very useful if they were raised well. While inside, Azard, remembering that the owner called this place a storage facility, noted that he did not expect much. But as it turned out, it was quite good here. Apart from the strange feeling, there was more than enough space. As soon as they went outside, Hazard told the master that while they were there, they felt as if something was filling them from within. The Dark Magician confirmed this, saying that it was his primary power called rebellion against divinity. He could completely trust the undead that lived only thanks to him. So he said that the vault was created only from his power, and the undead participating in the rebellion against the gods absorbed this power and became stronger thanks to it. Excited and attentive to such things, Rise worriedly asked whether such a burden was too heavy for the owner. When the young master asked if he was really worried, the extremely emotional undead bent low, apologizing to the master for this question. Diablo replied that everything was fine, because if it were a burden, he would not waste time on such things. As soon as Azard intervened in the conversation and asked if the master could make them stronger at a time, so as not to be in a place overflowing with bones, Rise immediately rushed to shut his mouth, knowing that he had a lack of upbringing. Understanding the intentions of this impudent guy, Jamie, although he enjoyed their emotionality, with a nervous laugh, suggested that he not open his mouth with such requests. The next morning, it was time to depart. The great magician from the past again felt embarrassed because of his parents' loving nature. Count Welton lifted him into the air, but Diablo could not say that he was not a toy, since he had to act out the role of a loving son named Jamie. Looking at his son, Argano sincerely asked him to be responsible, because he must protect his mother, sister, and friends. Devastated by this behavior, Diablo replied that he could be relied upon. Hugging his son, the father with a kind smile asked them to return safe and sound. Still, the great magician saw great support from him, so he sincerely agreed that he would do everything to make it so. The children set off on the road together with representatives of the church. Addressing the Order of Fear, Jack O'Brien stated that it was time to move out, so he would tell them their overall plan for the journey. While in the carriage, Riki said that he was sorry that Brother Ross was traveling separately from them, but he was sympathetic to his decision, because the Knight of the Set himself volunteered to join the escort squad. While listening to the team leaders talk, Jamie learned that they wanted to take the safe route, even though it would take a little longer. His mother sat next to him, and his younger sister Sarah, as usual, immediately fell asleep as soon as she got into the carriage. The time came for departure. The Count said goodbye to his family, again wishing them all the best. Addressing Jack, Raz said that he would guard their rear. Looking at the Knight of Light who rushed past their carriage with a smile on his face, Diablo wondered what the goddess Pyro was planning. Since nothing happened after he mentioned his real name, he decided that this woman had not said anything to the other gods. On the other hand, he was happy to suggest that perhaps she simply couldn't do it. Even though he didn't know the exact reason for the calmness after such an action, he knew for sure that a lot would change once he returned. It seemed that the journey would go smoothly, but Diablo was hasty with such an opinion. As soon as his sister woke up, Riki decided to meet her. But seeing him in front of her, Sarah began to feel some kind of fear and began to cry. Because of her scream, turmoil began in the carriage. The next 2 days were no different. Everything was boring, but at the same time very calm. This was Ricky's first time on such a long journey. Seeing his older brother in front of him, he was very happy, while Raz noticed that he saw that they already looked a little tired. When Jamie woke up, he was surprised at how long he had slept. Since he said these words out loud, Ricky guessed that his sleep took no more than 2 hours. Listening to their conversations, Ross Armitage said that since they were probably terribly bored sitting in the carriage, he could tell them an interesting story. It was about the legend about the local Maya Tray Mountains. Jamie immediately replied that it didn't sound very exciting, but at the same moment, his answer was shouted down by Ricky, with a sweet smile, saying that he would really like to hear the story. Anna was still sleeping, so Ross suggested that Ricky listen carefully so that he could tell her this later. He further began his story by saying that in a time when dragons soared in the skies and elves roamed the forests, the Maya Tray Mountains were originally one rock. But one peaceful day, two winged lizards with unimaginable power found themselves in this place. The mention of dragons changed Jamie's mind about the story, realizing that the legend could be a retelling of the true story. The legend told about the magnanimous dragon Mayatri and the evil black dragon. There was a girl there, a sorceress, whom Mayatri loved, but they were not destined to be together. The dragons, tired of watching this, sent a black one to kill the sorceress. In the midst of that fierce battle, the rocks split into pieces and a stormy stream rushed through the valley. After it was all over, the black one was, of course, expelled, but the girl died, and having lost her, Mayatri hid deep inside the mountains and remains there to this day. It is said that from that time on, this place became very rainy, and therefore the poets of that time called this weather dragon tears. Knowing how amazing and unimaginable the past was, Jamie wondered if it could be true, even though dragons were considered mystical creatures even then. After listening to her to the end, he decided to ask the knight about her progress. But at the same moment, strong lightning struck next to them. Everyone inside was frightened by such an unexpected natural phenomenon. Calming her daughter, the mother asked her not to worry, saying that everything was fine. Jamie supported her, saying that it was just rain. But at the same time, he was on guard because of some unpleasant feeling that accompanied this sudden natural phenomenon. At one point, another lightning strike hit the tree, which broke due to strong energy and flew towards the cart. Due to the strong blow, the cart could not stand still. She began to roll over, and the mother and her daughter sitting inside could not stay still. They fell out of the cart and flew down. Jamie began shouting their name, realizing the danger of the situation. Mom shouted that he had to take his sister, but in response, the young master promised that he would save them both. After that, he used the magic of creating a rope and was able to catch his mother and little sister. He barely managed to reach them, because they managed to fly quite far away. Everyone present was shocked, because only a young magician could save the lady from such a tragedy. Returning them to the surface, Jamie wondered what had suddenly happened. He did not believe that it was an accident. But at one point, his rope spell suddenly stopped working. Jamie didn't understand what was happening. His mom started to panic, so he shouted that he still had flying magic. But as it turned out, he could no longer use this power. As he fell down, he realized that mana burn, a high-level magic that causes mana to completely disappear in a certain area, was used against him, rendering the magician useless. As he fell down, he heard a woman's voice asking who he was. The unknown, mysterious woman asked directly if he was a dragon. The guy didn't understand what we were talking about. Then he fell into a pond that was located near the cliff on the edge of which they were riding. All the guards ran to the edge of the cliff, and the mother shouted the name of her son. The wards tried to hold her, but she panicked, fearing for the life of her beloved son, who managed to save them before falling down. As it turned out, at the last moment, they were supported by the divine power of the future apostle. Ricky volunteered to help, and somehow subconsciously managed to keep them in the air so that they also did not fall into the pond. His sister Anna managed to catch Sarah so the lady and her daughter were safe. The little girl was very worried about what happened to her brother. Addressing my lady, Ras, our medic, respectfully said that although his words might seem like an attempt to calm her down, he thought Jamie was perfectly fine. Turning to her, he warned that this was only an optimistic prospect on his part, but he was confident that Jamie was incredibly strong, despite his age. He explained that the currents could be very dangerous, but as soon as Jamie's magic returned, he would get out of there completely fine. After that, he shouted that he would go down anyway, and it would not be difficult for him to return safe and sound. At the same moment, the head of the guard, Jack, shouted that this was madness, because even for the Knight of Light of the Church of Pero, those streams could be very dangerous. Leaving the detachment, Ras, our medic, asked him to give him 3 hours, despite the fact that it would be dangerous even with the power of the Holy Marshal. Knowing this, my lady asked him to do everything possible to save her son. She was counting on his help. Kissing the woman's hand, which was equivalent to the title of Archbishop of their church, he promised that the order would be carried out. Jamie found himself in some kind of cave. His body was wrapped in chains and he was suspended in the air, not understanding where he was or how he got there. Looking around, he didn't understand who could do something like that. After that, he heard a woman's voice that he was glad that he had finally regained consciousness. A mysterious woman with long blue hair and dark horns on her head addressed him. She asked again if he was a dragon. In response, Jamie asked if he looked like one. The woman replied that this was not so, but then added that as soon as she saw him, she realized that he was far from dragons. But even with this thought, she decided not to stop. At the moment of her words, Diablo felt some hostility. Turning to him, she asked in surprise how he, an ordinary person, could have such great potential. Moreover, the young master's mana form and usage reminded her very much of dragons. Moreover, the breathing of the young man's entire body seemed to her similar to that used by mythical creatures. Addressing him, she stated that ordinary human mana breathing is terrible. People are stupid and weak, and therefore are not able to imitate dragons. Hearing these words, Jamie thought that those mythical creatures would have walked on thin ice when they were near him in the past. The stranger further suggested that if he was different, then he was probably from the elven tribe. After these words, she corrected herself, believing that even high elves could not compare with dragons. In response, a nervous Diablo asked her to tell her what she was even doing. The girl was surprised at his impudent behavior and asked how he had the courage to remain arrogant while chained. Trying to break free, Jamie corrected her words, saying that it would be better to ask why she was so tyrannical and arrogant that she mistook an innocent man for a dragon and kidnapped him in front of her family. The girl began to pretend that she didn't understand what he was talking about. But after that, Jamie said that the sudden downpour, the lightning that struck next to the carriage and the burning of mana, was far from just an accident. Turning around, she nevertheless admitted that he was right, and justified herself by saying that she only wanted to drag him here to personally verify her assumption. Then Diablo suddenly shouted that because of her trick, his mother and sister almost got hurt. But at the same moment, he wondered what had become of him if he was showing anger and emotion over such an incident. Addressing the strange but attractive girl with great force, he said that he didn't care, because in his heart, he still didn't know who she was. Seeing her angry look, he awkwardly replied that he would no longer pester her with stupid questions, after which he politely asked to remove his shackles. The girl refused and, in her defense, said that she liked how funny he looked in this position. Jamie went berserk, which made her very happy, and she said with emotion that his facial expression when angry was even cooler, so she almost didn't want to free him. Seeing her personality, which makes her like to make fun of people, he guessed that she was actually the blue dragon Maya Trey. Blue dragons are the most meek. They are especially kind to people. This can be compared to human sympathy for cats or dogs. If instead he had met a red or black dragon, which are known for their cruelty, or the famous cunning dragon, he would probably have died. Realizing his luck, the guy asked why she kidnapped him if she mistook him for a dragon. In response, the girl said with incredible anger that in that case she would kill him. Sensing her incredible bloodlust, Diablo asked with an awkward laugh if she would let him go after she was convinced that he was human. But Mayatri replied that she would not let him go, so the guy asked why she did not want to do this. The girl boastfully replied that she made such a decision because she could afford to do it. Looking at the guy, she suggested that if she used him as an ingredient, she could make an artificial life form created with the help of dragon power. Jamie wondered, because in fact a product made from a core consisting of his power would be much higher class than she had assumed. Just as he began to think about his worth, he suddenly realized that he was thinking about the wrong things to think about while on the verge of death. Calling her little sister, he sweetly asked why she wanted to kill dragons. His address infuriated the girl a little, and she sharply replied that it did not concern him. After this, he suggested that it might be due to his love for the person. After these words, he felt that the pressure from the dragon had changed. Mia Trey canceled the effect of her spell, and the guy was freed from his shackles. With a terrifying look and an angry tone, she said threateningly that if he blurted out something like that again, he would be neither alive nor dead. Yet his assumption was confirmed, so he said that it was due to the fact that others of his race did not accept the man about whom the legends spoke. He infuriated her by suggesting that because of this, she had betrayed her race to save that man's life. At the same moment, Miatra's incredible power began to create chaos. She shouted that his primitive mind would not understand her feelings. While in the flow of powerful dragon energy, he shouted that she had no intention of killing him or turning him into a Sparta because everything would have been much simpler if she had used brainwashing magic, which she did not do. After that, he sincerely shouted that she was so kind that it was hard to believe that she really was a dragon. Hearing these words, she remembered that her lover had made that same speech word for word. This pleasant memory, brought to her by the pitiful man, made her change her mind. Freeing the guy from her spell, she said that this was his last chance, and there would be no other. As soon as Jamie was able to return to the surface, he was already convinced that she was serious, and he should hold his tongue. Looking at him, Miatre said that he was a very strange person, just like him. Rising to his feet, Diablo asked who they were talking about. The dragon girl clarified that the young master reminds her of a guy from human legends. Meanwhile, Ras our medic continued his search for the young master. The rain did not stop. The presence of mysterious energy made him worry because he did not know how to help the young master. Miatre started her story by saying that it was 700 years ago and that guy's name was Ganon and he was a dark wizard. Seeing Jamie's reaction, she agreed that it was strange that a being of holy magic, a dragon, would love someone with such suspicious power. Hearing the following words, Diablo was shocked, because as it turned out, Ganon decided to use dark magic to learn the truth of this world. Being a human but a virtuoso sorcerer, he managed to reach the 9th rank. As soon as Jamie began to talk about how no one had been able to achieve this for thousands of years, the girl asked him to wait while she told him why this was so. Ganon began looking for answers long before meeting her. She joined him in overcoming many obstacles. After a while, they fell in love with each other. They felt very good together. Miatre had never felt this way towards dragons. This continued until the Dragon Lord gave the order spoken of in the legends. The Overlord stated that Ganon is evil that must be destroyed. All the dragons obeyed and began to try to kill her beloved. They escaped, but their powers were not unlimited. In desperation, Miatre begged him to leave, saying that even the dragons would not be able to reach him in the place they were talking about. She asked not to worry about her, saying that she would not die, no matter how they punished her. The place in question was a ruin with a strong restriction that prohibited more than one creature from entering. As a result, the wizard listened to the words of his beloved and took refuge in that place. From that day on, Miatre was banished for 1,000 years, but such a period is nothing for a dragon. However, a little over 10 years later, Ganon came for her as soon as he realized the truth of the world. Turning to her, he shouted about how she dared to continue to look at this world, asking if they were truly beings at the pinnacle of magic among all living beings. Seeing his behavior, the Dragon King said with a smile on his face that he was crazy. His friend agreed and said that this is a truth that the human mind cannot understand. As a result, Ganon saved her and they hid in this huge mountain to escape pursuit. And then, Ganon died. With sadness in her voice, she said that she thought it would be better this way, because he would be calmer. Nervously biting her lip, she said that despite his death, her team dared to erase everything that was somehow connected with the Great Wizard. They erased all records of him and even killed the people who saw him. Diablo knew that there was a truth that the dragons wanted to hide, and now he knew what it was about. Miatre explained that this is why she is in this place, to protect the remaining memory of your lover. It became clear that the legend was true and the dragons really did it. Now he realized why nothing was preserved about his past life. Realizing his rebirth, Diablo first began to look for something related to his true name. The records were obviously empty, but moreover, he couldn't even find any folk tales or epics. It seemed pointless to him, and it seemed to him that someone had deliberately covered up all traces of his great existence. The enemies carefully erased all mentions of Ganon, doing the same as with him. To be more precise, this was done not by 12 gods, but by the dragon god Brahman and his relatives. Now he learned that Ganon is a sorcerer who raised his level of magic to the 9th rank in order to find the truth of this world. But he did not understand why he had gone so far. Turning to Miatre, Jamie suggested that Ganon's tomb must be located here. The girl asked why he was asking. The young master replied that, as a person associated with magic, he would like to salute him. Hearing this, the girl began to remain silent, after which she calmly invited him to follow her. After that, they came to a place where there was a small green area. This is where Ganon was buried. As soon as they arrived, Jamie was shocked by what he saw. On the funeral cross was a bracelet that belonged to him in the past. It was known as the Absolute Immunization, the Ideal Cell. It is one of the 3 divine mechanisms created by Diablo Wolfer to counter the 12 gods, an artifact endowed with the ability to protect against all diseases and curses. Jamie couldn't even imagine that he would find him here. Now he understood the reason why Ganon sought the truth of this world. Having put on his artifact, he learned about the existence of Diablo Wolfer, a magician of the past who fought for humanity against the greedy gods. Looking at the dragon, he assumed that if he asked her to return the bracelet, she would probably kill him. As soon as Miatre approached the burial place of her lover, she turned to him, saying that she was nearby. Jamie decided to be careful, so first he asked what kind of bracelet it was. The girl replied that he was endowed with enormous power and belonged to her lover. According to her, that thing saved his life countless times. Jamie felt a little awkward knowing that she didn't even know it was a treasure filled with cleansing and protection magic. With an awkward laugh, he asked if this was really all that was left of her lover. Naturally, his unfortunate and thoughtless question caused her to become angry, causing her to look at him with incredible bloodlust and ask what he meant. Realizing the danger, the guy justified himself that he was just interested, because she had previously said that Ganon had comprehended the truth, and therefore, it was curious if there were any records about this. Miatre replied that her lover had a diary. In response, Jamie asked with a sweet look if he could look into it, but the girl replied that she did not want to do him such a favor. After this, the charming magician of the past asked the beauty to tell him what Ganon fought for. The girl was wary as soon as he suggested that she knew the truth of this world. Demonstrating her anger, the girl said threateningly that this was crossing all boundaries, because the truth of the world is not something that should become known to a person like Jamie. Diablo replied that she was mistaken, because in search of the truth, Ganon risked his life for the sake of humanity, and even though he failed, she protected his legacy, so she should not leave her lover as an exhibit, but help his dream come true. Miatre looked away, admitting that although Jamie was a child, he was quite smart. Despite this, she said that he was wrong about one thing, because she did not need any souvenirs. That is why she remembered every little thing about her lover. Hearing her words, Diablo felt that he understood her, because he had been in the same situation since his beloved died. As they walked on, he said that he didn't quite understand everything yet. Miatre replied that it was because he was still small. As it turned out, Jamie was still able to convince her, and she decided to show him the diary. However, she noted that she doubted that there would be any benefit, because nothing was written in that diary. Looking at the item, Jamie assumed it had a seal on it. The girl confirmed his opinion, saying that it would be difficult for an ordinary person to remove this seal. After that, she said that there was no time to waste, and she would send him to the place from where he came. But Jamie suddenly asked her to wait and warned her that no matter what she saw, she shouldn't be scared. Looking at him, Miatre was alarmed. She couldn't believe that he was a dark magician. Moreover, she was stunned by his sinister power. Before her eyes, he was superior to a completely different level. Even his mana suddenly changed. Within seconds, Jamie said that he had removed the seal from Ganon's diary. The ancient magic dissipated, and while Miatre could not believe her eyes, the guy began to read. The first entry was about how Ganon faced the blue dragon, who called her dirty because of his dark magic. Then we talked about the fact that they, in some miraculous way, began to explore this world together. According to him, thanks to the Mayatras, their trip turned out to be quite fun. The third entry said that taking off on the dragon, he ended up in the place indicated on his map. These were lands on which a person could not set foot, so it occurred to him to call this place Decay. Events reached a period when the Dragon Lord gave the order to his relatives to kill Ganon, but in his notes, he assured that he could handle it. He was more afraid for Mayatra because she betrayed her family for his sake. During his travels, he encountered a mysterious tombstone. The date on it was stated as 70,000 years ago. Then they talked about how they settled in the mountains, where it was safe, in order to hide from persecution for some time. After resting, they planned to travel north to Garmin, which is the location written at the very bottom of the tombstone of the mysterious man of the past that Ganon was interested in. Addressing his predecessor in his diary, he wrote that although such lands no longer existed, he was sure that he would find something there regarding the truth of the world and the great wizard. While Jamie read the book, Miatre could not hold back her tears from the memories of her lover. Diablo, of course, understood the tombstone Ganon was writing about. Before the final war began, Diablo Wolfer, to strengthen his resolve, poured out his sorrows of the past and hopes of the future on the very stone in question. More than 60,000 years later, Ganon was able to find that tombstone, and 700 years after his death, Diablo was able to be reborn. Respectfully returning the diary, Jamie wondered where Harmon was, where his gravestone was located. All this seemed strange, because Ganon came across his trail a little differently than he had intended to do it. And yet the event seemed wonderful to him and brought a pleasant smile. Thanks to the bracelet's power, Ganon was able to discover the hidden truth about the 12 gods. Even though he learned the truth about the enslavement of humanity, he could not fulfill his duty. Diablo Wolfer returned to Earth again, in a new guise only to incinerate the 12 gods, with the hope that humanity would one day regain freedom. With tears in her eyes, Miatre was incredibly happy that she was able to find out what her lover was writing about. During their travels, he never admitted that he loved her, and it also infuriated him when she clung to him. With a kind smile, Jamie said that since she realized this, then she should remember that Ganon will always live in her heart. Addressing the dragon, he stated that this would be the case until she forgot him. In response, the girl was surprised that the young man could also say nice words, despite his young age. Constantly hearing such words addressed to oneself was not the most pleasant sight for someone who had existed for more than 60,000 years. But Jamie remained silent. Hugging the book, Miatre wondered aloud how wonderful it would be if she could go back to those times. To calm her down a little, he put his hand on her head and said that such thoughts befall everyone. At the same moment, The girl grabbed his hand and asked about his black mana. With hope in her eyes, she asked if he was a dark magician. Jamie tried to justify himself by saying that it was ordinary magic, but the girl did not let him finish talking about this nonsense and said that she herself tried to use dark magic to remove the seal. The guy was shocked when he heard that she was able to cope with such teaching. As it turned out, the sacred being was not going to bother himself with such matters. Mayare boasted that she had simply brought an expert, but it was clear that she had kidnapped the magicians. Humming, she said that their views were quite similar, so if he didn't want to die, he should have followed her. Jamie disgustedly replied that it was a kidnapping with a threat. Despite all her less-than-honest efforts, the seal could not be removed, and this was the case until Jamie appeared before her. She didn't want to admit it, but she still said that it seemed to her that her lover's strength was not from this world. Diablo decided that he should support her, so he suddenly declared that if truth be told, he was a magician who would grant Ganon's dying wishes. The girl doubted his words, because the entire inheritance was in her possession, so those who had never met him could not know what his true path was. Jamie replied that although they had not met, they were pursuing the same goal, so the words that he was fulfilling his dying wish were not an exaggeration. Falling to her knees, Mayatre suggested with some disappointment that he too was about to fight the 12 gods. Hearing this, Jamie was shocked as he did not expect Ganon to mention this. As it turned out, he did not talk about this, but Mayatre realized this after reading his diary. Ganon was truly angry at the 12 gods and hated the dragons for collaborating with them. She wanted to warn the guy about the dangers of such plans, but Jamie firmly replied that she was right, and he was really going to challenge them. Clutching her lover's diary in her hands, Mayatre said that this was impossible. She also hated dragons. She was sure that Jamie would soon be able to achieve strength comparable to mythical creatures. Nervously clenching her teeth, she asked not to be arrogant, because there are as many as 12 creatures there that have incredible power. She asked him to live a human life for his own good. Turning to Jamie, the girl asked him to give up, but in response he mentioned a story about a great magician of the past. He told that there was a man who challenged the gods, who had many followers, but they all either died or betrayed him. In the end, he lost to the 12 gods and was sealed in the realm of eternity, but even at that moment he did not give up. He promised that he would return, no matter what the cost, even if such an opportunity presented itself to him in the distant future. Using this story as an example, Jamie stated that this is why he cannot give up. The girl was shocked by the seriousness of his intentions. Diablo knew that not only he, Ganon, and someone from more ancient times, but even those born after his sealing continued his work, and their dying wishes continued to exist until the 12 gods were destroyed. After this, without doubting the seriousness of Jamie's words, Mayatre invited him to follow her. Returning to her lover's grave, she took the bracelet and said that she was sure Ganon wouldn't mind. Jamie asked, confused, if she was sure about this. The girl replied that he should not refuse until she changed her mind. The guy, delighted with her action, promised that he would be careful with this gift. As soon as he put on the bracelet, he felt that it was welcoming its owner. Still, they had not seen each other for quite some time, and the object was endowed with its own will. Using her dragon magic, the girl declared that if the moment of battle with the gods came, she would help him with all her might. The guy thanked her for her support, realizing that the dragon's promise was certainly a wonderful result. After these words, the girl told him to get lost, and with best wishes, kicked him into the funnel, which would bring him back out. For the first time in hundreds of years, she felt so at ease. Addressing her lover, she stated that his dream really continues to exist. Meanwhile, the Knight of Light continued to inspect the surroundings and noticed that the rain had suddenly stopped. Within a moment, he saw the young master appear in the air right in front of him. Jamie asked how he was doing and what he was doing. Ras Armetic could not believe his eyes, but he was convinced that his guesses that nothing bad would happen to the young master would be justified. Taking him by the hand, he invited the young magician to return to the others. As soon as he returned, the excited mother rushed to meet him and hugged him so that he could hardly breathe. Ricky and his sister could hardly contain their joy. They felt more relieved when the young master returned to them safe and sound. Bowing before the Knight of Light, the Welton family guard said, "Which will forever be in his debt." But in response, Mr. Rass answered in confusion that in fact he had not done anything for this. Saying this, he felt awkward, because although his search did not bring any results, he even used the power of Saint Martial to keep his promise. In the seldom empire of Pierre Nesmond's county, there was a mysterious school of magic, in which there was a girl with a far from best reputation. During the next experiment, the awkward student again dropped the animal that was to be experimented on. They started yelling at her for not holding the rat properly. Benny once again made a mistake, because of which she had to clean the laboratory. She wondered how long she could keep doing this kind of nonsense. At the same moment, She heard conversations from other students, where they called her thick-headed and hoped that she would soon simply disappear from their school. They were in the same room. One of the girls said that she was shaking with anger because of the sight of Benny. She did not understand why the school principal was protecting her. Benny couldn't believe that they were being so rude behind her back. At the same moment, the blonde girl turned to the poor guy with pink hair and, calling her trash, asked her to bring her items from the list, which she disrespectfully threw in her direction. She furiously declared that she would have to redo the experiment. The shy girl did not know what to answer, while the dissatisfied student shouted that she should immediately begin to carry out the assignment, since she was to blame for what had happened. The girl agreed to the request, enduring all the insults. As soon as she left the room, the students began discussing her behavior and her reaction to their rudeness again. With tears in her eyes, the girl looked at the list and thought why she was so weak that she couldn't even stand up for herself. Meanwhile, the guys had already arrived at the Count's estate and a lavish meal began. A man with blonde hair thanked the guests for coming such a long way, after which he invited them to start their meal, saying that the chef tried very hard to please with his dishes. The rest time began. Raz, Ricky, and Anna were crazy about the delicious food that was offered to them. Turning to the man, the lady thanked him for his concern. The man replied that this was nothing, because he was only worried that such a thing would not meet the standards of the daughter of the great Bell family. After a pleasant time, evening came and everyone went to their rooms to rest. Taking advantage of the moment, Jamie went out onto the streets of the city and soon realized that it was very boring here. A little earlier, he barely managed to escape from Ricky because he began to follow him, asking what his plan was. Communicating with his pet, whose presence he continued to hide, Diablo was glad to hear that he too wanted to enjoy a little more of a pleasant and carefree walk. As it turned out, his valuable artifact on his arm attracted the attention of local thieves. Two guys, who looked more like some kind of children of noble families, were interested in the item that the young man was wearing on the street. One of them noted that this artifact was very remarkable and should not be possessed by some brat. His companion assumed that Jamie was a nobleman and his parents gave him the bracelet without suspecting anything. Pursuing his goal, the guy with the long nose asked his friend whether their director would like such a reward. The bald student replied that he could probably even reward them for such a find. Jamie continued his walk, but suddenly he heard a worried squeak from his pet. He understood what they were talking about, because he himself noticed that they were being pursued by two ill-wishers. Despite his friend's worries, Diablo said that he didn't care what they came for. With a sly smile on his face, he said that with the help of those poor fellows, he could get rid of the boredom of this ordinary day. The students continued the pursuit and entered a remote corner, not noticing where the boy had disappeared. While Jamie was on the roof of one of the buildings and calmly watched them, they were worried that at this rate they would lose their prey. Snapping his fingers, Jamie told his pet that he had seen enough of those primitive thieves, and it was time for some fun. After snapping his fingers, a guy with a long nose noticed movement around the corner of the house and said that their target was in that direction. Jamie clapped his hands in satisfaction as his plan began to work. He was thinking about conducting some kind of test between those poor fellows. But in one sudden moment, he felt that a portal had appeared behind him, through which hands were reaching out to him. He couldn't believe that he had been careless and made such a mistake. As it turned out, it was not the work of those two students.